They whisper through the pines those echoes of things you were never supposed to hear. High in the mountains of Japan, where the mist settles into folds like the breath of sleeping gods, something is watching. You don't know when the path disappeared. The brush closed in around you. Now there's just the sound of cicadas clicking a rhythm that doesn't quite line up with time. You pause, you listen, and for a moment you swear you can hear it, an old bell, a voice, the steady crunch of straw sandals on a trail no longer marked. This isn't a dream. It isn't a place on any map. You've found yourself in the middle of one of Japan's oldest unsolved riddles, and you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And if you're watching from somewhere unusual, late night in Kyoto, midnight in Michigan, 3 a.m. in a Tokyo capsule hotel, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love seeing where our little mysteries travel. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. Because Japan isn't just temples and vending machines. Beneath the serenity of its tea fields and bullet trains, under centuries of lacquered wood and ritual incense, there are holes in the story. Places where the past slipped through the cracks. Things built when there should have been no builders. Names that appear in records then vanish. Whole villages swallowed by silence laws that don't apply past a tunnel entrance swords, carried by boy emperors that somehow disappear beneath the waves. Historians still debate whether these are myths distorted by time or memories preserved in story, because the truth was too dangerous to write down. But you're about to wander through that fog for yourself. We'll trace strange sonar signals beneath Lake Biwa, follow fox spirits through the alleys of Kyoto, walk tunnels where the air turns sour and the birds stop singing. And we'll stand beneath temple ceilings still stained with the blood of 300 samurai who chose ritual death over capture. You'll meet a man whose severed head flew across the country and refused to rot. You'll hear a woman counting from the bottom of a well. You'll climb a mountain that might be a pyramid. And if you're very quiet, you might even see a light hovering above the dunes. A light with no flame, no explanation, and no reflection in your camera. Japan remembers its ghosts, and tonight you will too. There's a rusted gate at the edge of the world, and it doesn't want you to come in. You found it somehow. Maybe you weren't even looking. Maybe you were just driving the quiet roads of Fukuoka Prefecture at dusk, the mountains starting to close in the sky-bruised lavender and gray. Your GPS stutters. A turn you don't remember taking leads to an overgrown path. Ahead through the brush is a tunnel, low, wet, silent. You get out of the car, and for a second the cicadas stop. This is the Inunaki Tunnel. It's real. It's mapped. It was built in the 1940s and decommissioned decades later after so many accidents that even local officials stopped pretending it was just bad luck. People talk about it the way you'd talk about a cliff edge you can't see at night. You don't go near it, even if it's on the map. Especially if it's on the map. The gate is warped. A single, half-faded sign says, "Do not enter." Not in that tidy official kanji, but the kind of paint that runs when it's rained on too many times. Someone spray-painted an arrow beside it, but it points nowhere. You step closer. The air inside is cooler, thick like fog before a storm. Your phone buzzes once and goes dark. No signal. No GPS. No time either, if we're being honest. because you've crossed into a space where the clocks don't tick right anymore. And just ahead, there's a whisper. Not words, just movement. Something brushing against the inside of the tunnel's dark throat. They say, if you keep going past that first bend, where the light disappears completely, you'll find a village that doesn't exist. Inunaki Village translates more or less to Dog Bark Village. Odd name. Stranger story. According to legend, the laws of Japan don't apply there. There's a weathered sign at its entrance if you believe the reports stating that outright the Japanese Constitution is not in effect beyond this point. Cute, right? Except it's not. There's no record of any village with that name in the mountains near Miyawaka. Not in government archives. Not in Edo period maps. But the stories go back farther than internet horror threads and low-budget horror films. Some say it began after World War II, when Japan was still reeling from trauma. Its countryside a patchwork of broken roads and broken families. Others whisper that it goes back even farther, to the days when the shogunate let remote villages run themselves, where people made their own rules, and sometimes their own gods. And yet, there was a place nearby called Inunaki. It was real. A tiny settlement later submerged by dam construction in the 1980s. Some of the buildings still sit at the bottom of the reservoir, rotting slowly under murky water. That's the official record, but it doesn't explain the reports, like the one from 1988, when a group of teenagers lured a young man to the tunnel and set him on fire. They left him screaming in the dark. After that, no one called it urban legend anymore, just cursed. Since then, stories have only multiplied. People report flickering lanterns in the woods beyond the tunnel, even though there's no electricity. They hear children laughing at night, when there are no children for miles. Some hikers talk about a woman in a white kimono, her face obscured, standing at the edge of the forest where the trees are too still. You keep walking. You shouldn't, but you do. After the tunnel, the path continues. More brush. More wrongness. Maps stop working. You look at your phone and the compass spins. Some explorers say they found old houses, real ones, half buried in moss doors, still open bowls still on the tables. Others talk about residents, silent, unmoving, who watch from windows and do not blink. And then there are the ones who never come back at all. Historians still debate whether Inunaki Village was just a displaced hamlet swallowed by resettlement policies. Japan's interior is dotted with abandoned towns, casualties of economic collapse, famine, disease. But why the secrecy? Why the signs? Why the overwhelming dread? One theory suggests it was used during the war for covert experiments. A remote location where records were scrubbed clean afterward. Others say it's a temporal slip of fold in reality, where time loops endlessly and no one can die or leave. You step off the path just a little. The brush parts, and for a moment, the trees open like curtains. There's something ahead, a torii gate, broken in half. The bark of a dog echoes behind you, sharp and short. Except dogs don't live here. Not anymore. And still the air smells like smoke. Old smoke. Like something once burned and is still burning beneath the roots. The name Inunaki, according to one folktale, comes from a dog who tried to warn its master of an ambush. The man, startled by the barking, killed the dog. When he discovered the truth, he buried the animal with honor, naming the pass after its cry. A mistake. A warning. A voice silenced when it should have been heard. It's poetic. Or maybe it's prophetic. Because the stories aren't just about a cursed village. They're about warnings no one heeds, boundaries we cross, questions we shouldn't ask. People near the modern Anunnaki past don't talk much about it. Some say nothing at all. Others dismiss it with a quick laugh, too quick. But a few say, in low voices, that there are places even the hunters avoid, where the birds don't sing, where the wind doesn't blow, where you can hear your own thoughts too loudly. You keep walking, because of course you do. The ground here is damp, soft, almost spongy. You pass a stone marker etched in kanji, half obscured by ivy. It doesn't say Anunnaki. It says something older, something written in a dialect that fell out of use before the Meiji Restoration. The tunnel is gone now, behind you. Maybe it never existed, but the silence, that's still here. So what is Anunnaki Village? A rural legend mutated by grief and fear, a collapsed memory of a place erased by time or something deeper, something built on buried guilt and the things no one wants to speak aloud. You may never know, but if you feel someone watching from just beyond the tree line, don't turn around. The village doesn't like to be found, but once you do, it remembers you. There's a small courtyard in Tokyo, tucked away behind clean glass towers and the neat geometry of government buildings. Most people don't notice it. It's too still, too ordinary. But step inside, and you'll find a quiet shrine with a moss-covered mound, ringed in white gravel and shaded by one solemn tree. Visitors leave offerings, sack rice, paper cranes, not out of devotion, out of caution. Because beneath this mound lies a head, not a metaphor, not a relic, a head, and the legend says it refuses to stay buried. The man it belonged to was Taira no Masakado, a 10th century samurai who did the one thing you're not supposed to do in Japan. He challenged the emperor, not in poetry or debate, but with swords and declarations. He proclaimed himself Shino, a new emperor of an eastern realm. For a moment, he nearly pulled it off. You don't do that and get away with it. Born into the powerful Taira clan during the Heian period, Masakado was a skilled warrior known for defiance. In 939 AD, amid rising tensions between the imperial court and regional landowners, he led an outright rebellion. He seized provinces, built his own court, and declared sovereignty. But the court responded swiftly. His rebellion was crushed. Masakado was killed in battle. His head was taken to Kyoto, displayed in public, a warning to others. That should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. The head, it said, didn't decompose, not for weeks. Its eyes remained open, alert, angry. Then one night, the impossible happened. It flew. Yes, you heard that right. It took flight across mountains and rivers until it landed in Shibasaki, the village that would later become Tokyo. Locals found it, buried it, built a mound to calm the restless spirit. That's the official folklore version. Ridiculous, right? Except the shrine still exists. The head mound is still there, and no one dares disturb it. In 1874, during the Meiji era, a group of officials tried to move the mound to make way for new construction. Within weeks, many fell ill. A few died. Work stopped. The mound was restored. In 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake hit. A nearby Ministry of Finance building collapsed. Many of those killed had publicly scoffed at the shrine's warnings. When reconstruction plans were drawn, they left the mound untouched. Later, during the American post-war occupation, engineers considered demolishing the site. Their equipment failed, repeatedly. Local workers refused to go near it. The military gave up. Even today, that patch of land valuable Central Prime, Tokyo real estate, remains untouched. The shrine is maintained, the mound left unbroken. Employees at nearby offices bow when they pass. Some call it superstition. Others call it insurance. Historians agree that Masakato was real. His rebellion is documented in the Shomanki, one of Japan's oldest war chronicles. He was a folk hero in the East, a threat to the central authority. After his death, he was enshrined as a Goryo, a vengeful spirit, a force of wrath and consequence. But what makes his story so unnerving isn't just the idea of a cursed head. It's how consistently people have obeyed the curse. In the most technologically advanced city in the world, surrounded by neon and bullet trains, people still step lightly around a 1,000-year-old grave. They still fear the whisper of the warrior who didn't bow. The Tokyo government keeps the shrine clean. Businesses nearby send offerings, not for profit, for peace. Some say they've seen things, flickers of movement near the mound, shadowy figures that vanish in fluorescent light. At night, the wind moves differently there, heavier, like it remembers. The name Masakato isn't used lightly in theater or popular culture. When it does appear, he's rarely mocked. Even now, he's portrayed as dangerous, noble, maybe divine. A rebel, but a divine one. A contradiction Japan knows well. Some fringe theories go further. They say the head was never buried, that it was sealed. Some believe Masakato's mound acts as a rariochi, a spiritual anchor, a point of massive unseen energy, maybe even a keystone in Tokyo's metaphysical balance. Move it, and you risk unbinding things better left bound. There's even a theory that the reason Tokyo has endured so many disasters, fires, earthquakes, bombings, is because of what sleeps below that courtyard. And the reason it always rebuilds, because the head remains at peace. Historians still debate whether the events tied to the shrine are coincidence or confirmation bias. After all, Japan sits on fault lines. Earthquakes are common. Government buildings collapse. Superstitions grow in stressful times. But then you ask, why not just move the shrine? It's just a rock and a story, right? And the silence that follows, that's the part you believe. You imagine walking past it. Just concrete, grass, a tree. But something turns your head. The shrine's gate creaks even when there's no wind. You feel watched, not by the building, not by the mound, but by something beneath it. Something that once refused to serve and still waits to see who bows and who doesn't. In one version of the story, Masakato's head remained awake for years, talking, laughing, plotting. That's probably just legend. Probably. But when you stand before the mound and feel the air shift, when the lights above buzz just a little louder, you wonder. You wonder what happens if the mound is cracked open again, if the spirit within is no longer at peace. Because he wasn't just a man, he was a message. The message that sometimes power doesn't fade. It waits, it watches, and it counts those who forget. So you bow, not because you believe, but because, what if the sea claws at the rocks along Kyushu's coast, restless and loud, like it remembers something you've forgotten? You stand there in Miyazaki Prefecture wind, tugging at your sleeves, eyes drawn to a cave carved deep into the base of a black cliff. From the outside, it doesn't look like much. A hollow, a shadow. But inside, it's older than your language, older than your maps, and older maybe than memory itself. They call it Ryugu-do, The Dragon Palace Cave. The name comes from legend, the tale of Urashima Taro. You remember it vaguely, maybe from a children's book or an old cartoon. A fisherman saves a turtle. The turtle thanks him and carries him beneath the sea to a palace made of coral and crystal ruled by a princess named Otohime. There's dancing music, a sense that time has melted into gold. After what feels like a few days, Urashima returns to the surface. And centuries have passed. His home is gone. His family forgotten. The world has moved on without him. A fairy tale, right? Except this cave exists. And it lines up with the legend. It stretches far into the cliffside, cold and wet, lit only by shafts of light that drip in from cracks in the rock above. Moss lines the walls like ancient velvet. Water pools quietly in stone bowls that no one carved but somehow fit the shape of hands. The deeper you walk, the quieter the outside world becomes, until even the sea goes still. Locals have always said it was sacred, not just because of the legend, but because things grow differently near the cave. Some trees twist in strange directions, birds avoid the mouth, and people change. One fisherman said he lost track of time inside. Hours passed, like minutes. Another claimed he saw flickering towers just beneath the water's edge vanished when he blinked. A third stopped speaking entirely after a visit. Not out of fear, just stopped. Historians trace the Urashima story back over 1,000 years. It's recorded in early chronicles, even etched into woodblock prints. But the details are suspiciously specific. For a folk tale, a turtle a box. He's warned never to open the Dragon Palace under the sea and time dilation. You know what else describes those things? Encounters of a different kind. Some theorists, quiet ones, fringe ones, suggest the Urashima myth isn't a fantasy. It's a memory, a cultural artifact passed down from a real event. Not a trip to a literal palace of sea gods, but something stranger. An interaction with something not of this world, or maybe not of this timeline. Because what is time really in a land of earthquakes, forgotten emperors, and sleeping volcanoes? Urashima's tale isn't unique. Stories like his people visiting paradises returning to find centuries past appear all over the world. Irish tales of Tir na Nog, Chinese legends of Mount Penglai, even Rip Van Winkle dozing for 20 years in the Catskills. But here it isn't just a story, it's a place. And Ryugudo isn't alone. Just a short drive inland, you'll find ancient coffin keyhole-shaped burial mounds dating back to the 3rd century. Their layout. Some say they echo the spiral patterns found in deep-sea coral. Others say they align not with the stars, but with the ocean. A few mounds face directly toward the cave. Coincidence maybe, maybe not. Further up the cliff sits Udo Shrine, one of the most breathtaking and precarious temples in Japan. It's built directly into the rock overlooking the sea. Pilgrims come to pray to deities of fertility and safe childbirth. But its location, its placement above Ryugudo feels like a seal, like a warning, and the shrine's records incomplete. As if someone wanted to preserve the ritual, but not the reason. Then there's the box. In the story, Otohime gives Urashima a tamatabako, a jewel box, before he leaves. She tells him never open it. Naturally, he does. Inside is a puff of smoke, and his youth. The moment it escapes, he ages in seconds, withers, dies. Most scholars say it's a metaphor. Don't look back. Don't chase the past. But the box, too, shows up in archaeology. Small, ornate cases recovered from coastal burial sites. Some contain strange powders, some sealed with coral-based glue that hasn't degraded in over 1,000 years. One case found not far from Miyazaki held an unknown mineral, not toxic, not native to Japan, uncatalogued, disappeared in transit to Tokyo University in 1963. No explanation given, and yet the story persists. Children still learn it. Shrines still reference it. Tour guides tell it like it's bedtime folklore. But they don't go into the cave. No one does not very far. It's not blocked off. There are no guards. Just a kind of understanding. You can step in. But if you go too deep, it's not guaranteed you'll come out the same. Some say the Dragon Palace still exists, but not in this dimension. That it's a pocket, a fold in the skin of the world where time doesn't flow, it pools. Others say the palace was never a place. It was a being, the sea itself. Conscious, ancient, curious. And Urashima, he wasn't chosen. He was pulled. The cave says nothing. It just watches the ocean day after day, tide after tide. It doesn't blink. It doesn't move. But it waits. And if you step inside, if you hear a splash that isn't yours, or feel warmth when there should be cold, you'll wonder, are you the visitor or the offering? Either way, the sea doesn't forget. The waves roll quietly now, but they remember what happened. You're standing at Dan no Ura, near the Strait of Shimonoseki, just sea and sky, and the occasional cry of gulls. The water here doesn't look like a battlefield, but it is. One of Japan's most tragic, most decisive battles took place right here. And something was lost that day. Not just a child, not just a dynasty, but maybe a piece of divine history. Maybe even a sword. The year was 1185. The end of the Genpei War. Two clans, Taira and Minamoto, fought for control of Japan. Samurai clashed alliances, broke temples, burned, and here on this stretch of ocean, everything unraveled. The Taira, outmatched and desperate, fled by ship, with their last hope aboard the young Emperor Antoku. He was 6 years old. 6. With him, according to every imperial record that matters, were the 3 sacred treasures of Japan, symbols of divine rule passed down from the gods themselves: a mirror, a jewel, and a sword. The mirror, it turns out, wasn't even there. It remained at Ise Shrine, protected untouched. The jewel recovered, but the sword, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, was lost, swallowed by the sea. Gone, or so they say. When the battle turned against the Taira and Toku's grandmother, Taira no Tokiko gathered the boy and the treasures in her arms and leapt into the ocean. The sea took them. The sword sank. The child drowned. But the implications, they rippled across the centuries. See, the Kusanagi isn't just a ceremonial object. It's said to have been pulled from the tail of an 8-headed serpent by the storm god Susanoo. It symbolizes valor, authority, truth. It's not just a weapon. It's a relic of divine origin. Without it, the emperor's legitimacy becomes a question, and that's a problem. So the court declared, it's fine. The sword was recovered or replaced. A replica was made, or maybe it was never lost at all. All very neat, all very polite. Except no one sees the sword, not even the emperor. At imperial enthronements, the sacred regalia are presented but never shown. No photos, no scholars allowed. The sword is always wrapped, veiled, symbolic. Because what if it's not real? What if it's just an idea? That's what keeps historians up at night. The possibility that the most important artifact in Japanese mythology might be missing, and that the throne continues anyway, pretending it's not. Historians still debate whether the sword lost at Dan no Ura was the real Kusanagi or already a copy. Some records hint at earlier replacements. Others suggest the sword never existed as a physical object at all, but as a metaphor, an embodiment of celestial mandate. But then the sightings begin. Treasure hunters, divers, whispered reports of something metallic deep in the strait. A few claim to have found fragments, blades of strange metal, corroded but unrecognizable. Every time the evidence vanishes, every time silence follows, the currents here are treacherous, the seafloor unstable. Sediment shifts, wrecks disappear. If the sword lies beneath it, may be entombed forever in silt, or lost in an underwater cave, or something else entirely. Some say it was never lost, that a loyal Tyra retainer escaped the battle with it hidden, that it was passed down in secret generation to generation, protected by silence. Others suggest it was taken by Minamoto forces kept hidden to control the narrative. After all, the winners write history, and still others, those whispery voices at the edge of academic respectability, believe it never sank. Not really. That it returned to the gods. That the Kusanagi was too sacred to be held by a losing side, and it withdrew itself. That's the word used. Withdrew. Not lost, not stolen. Withdrew. In Shinto tradition, objects can become a divine. Not just symbols, but beings. The Kusanagi, they say, may not be an object at all. It may be a presence. And like any divine force, it chooses when to appear, when to be found, when to vanish, and maybe when to punish. In the years after Dan no Ura disasters hit hard, floods, famines, fires, some blamed the loss of the sword. Others saw it as a test. Still others said the sword isn't gone. It's watching. There's a shrine near the water now, a Kama shrine, built in honor of Emperor Antoku. Red beams, carved dragons, ceremonies held each spring, children in court robes, monks chanting for the soul of a child emperor who never had a chance, offerings left, prayers whispered, but no one mentions the sword. The Imperial Household Agency maintains it exists, that it's kept in the Atsuta Shrine in Nagoya, wrapped, hidden, revered. But no official has ever unwrapped it, no scholar has studied it. And in 2005, when an accidental fire threatened the shrine, security swarmed the grounds within minutes, quietly, without explanation. You wonder, what if they're guarding something empty? What if the weight of a nation rests on a hollow box? It's not unprecedented. In medieval Europe, whole thrones were propped up by forged relics and fabricated bloodlines. But Japan has built its mythology on unbroken continuity, a lineage that stretches back to the sun goddess herself. Remove the sword, and what unravels? And yet the sea offers no answers. Divers go down and come back with stories, but no artifacts. A few never come back at all. One team in the early 1990s reported sonar anomalies near the ocean floor, grid-like shapes. Then nothing. Equipment failure, static, memory cards wiped. Was it the current, or was it something else, protecting what was never meant to be found? Some fringe scholars go even further. They suggest the sword is not a sword at all, but an interface, a device, a key. The description in myth drawn from a serpent's tail linked to storms doesn't match any traditional blade. What if it was something else? something older than Japan, something not of this earth. They're dismissed, of course, as cranks, as dreamers, but their books still sell. And late at night you wonder, because there's a truth beneath these waves, a sacred treasure, lost or hidden or never real. And still, the sea remembers. It rolls against the shore like a breath held too long, waiting, watching, and maybe, just maybe, guarding. You smell it before you see it. The sulfur clings to your throat, sharp, metallic, like bad eggs mixed with wet stone. It crawls up your sinuses and settles in your chest. And then there it is, a dead land, gray ash underfoot, pools of milky green water bubbling like soup no one should drink. Jagged rocks jut out of the earth like broken teeth. Steam slips between them in long, slow exhales. This is Mount Osore, Fear Mountain. They say it's one of the gates to the afterlife. You'd believe it. The air itself feels thin here. Not oxygen thin, soul thin. As if the veil between your breath and someone else's memory has worn too smooth. Even the wind moves differently. Quiet, careful, like it's trying not to wake anything. Mount Osore sits at the northern tip of Honshu, Japan's main island, surrounded by dormant volcanoes fed by geothermal springs. From above, the caldera looks like a crater punched into the earth by something that regretted its decision the moment it hit. And in the middle of it all, a Buddhist temple, Bodaiji, founded over 1,000 years ago by the monk Enin. It was meant to be a place for contemplation, meditation, connection to the dead, which sounds lovely until you actually get here. Because this isn't peace. This is something older. In Buddhist tradition, Mount Osore resembles the Sanzu River, a mythic boundary between the living and the dead. Think of it like Japan's version of the river Styx. Souls are said to gather here after death, waiting to cross. Some pass, some don't. Some linger, and some whisper. You hear them sometimes. In the wind, in the gaps between stones. Disembodied syllables. Nothing concrete. Just that sense that you're being spoken to, and not kindly. But what really makes Mount Osore different isn't the geography or even the legends. It's the people who come here, the ones who speak with the dead. Every summer during the Itako Taisai festival, a group of blind women known as Itako gather at the temple. They've trained for years, isolated, disciplined, possessed, some say. Their job to act as mediums, to channel the voices of the departed, not as a metaphor, not poetically, literally. People line up for hours. They bring photos, locks of hair, questions they never got to ask, and the Atako answer. Their eyes remain closed. Their bodies sway. Voices shift, deepen, crack, as if someone else has stepped inside and borrowed the vocal cords for a moment. Names are mentioned that no one else could have known. Details offered that no tourist brochure includes. Skeptics say it's theater, cold reading, high context culture layered with grief and good guesses. But then there are the other stories, the ones where the Itako mention things no one spoke aloud, secrets never told, final words whispered into pillows before the breathing stopped. You sit, you listen, and for a moment you believe. But it doesn't stop there. Mount Osore has long been associated with the kami spiritual beings in Shinto tradition. Normally, kami inhabit trees, rivers, stones, even kitchen knives. They're part of the world, natural, balanced. But the kami at Osore, They don't behave the same way. They're nameless, unfixed, not worshipped so much as negotiated with. Some say they're older than Shinto, older than Buddhism, older than Japan. Some say they never died because they were never alive. Legends speak of lights above the sulfur lakes, not fireflies, not swamp gas, but slow-moving orbs, blue, cold, watching. Others talk about dreams that change after a visit. People wake up speaking dialects they don't know, seeing faces they've never met. One monk reportedly vanished for 3 days. When he returned, he was soaked shaking and refused to speak for the rest of his life. Still think it's just volcanic gases. Geologists offer explanations. Sure, the sulfur can induce headaches, nausea, hallucinations. Sure, the eerie silence is due to topography. Wind breaks mineral absorption. But even they admit Mount Osere feels different. And then there's the idea of thin places. Across the world, certain locations appear in myth and folklore more than they should. Mountains, islands, caves, places where the veil between realities thins, where communication, accidental or deliberate, might occur. Mount Osere ticks every box. Remote check, violent geological history check, religious and spiritual significance for over a millennium check, persistent reports of contact loss and transformation. Absolutely. And if it's thin here, if the border between the living and the dead has worn away in spots, then who's crossing? Just us or something else? Some esoteric scholars propose that the kami here aren't just spirits of nature or ancestors, but holdovers, beings from a time before humans walked this land. Not aliens, not demons, just older intelligences. Not malicious, but curious, and perhaps not thrilled about being observed. They say this land wasn't shaped for us. We simply built temples on top of the sleeping body, which brings us to the statues. Everywhere around Osere, nestled in the cracks, between rocks, stand little Jizo statues, guardians of children who died before their parents. You'll see them dressed in red bibs, surrounded by pinwheels, left with candy, toys, sometimes letters. Some say, when the wind picks up just right, you can hear the pinwheels turn before the gust reaches. Some say the Jizo cry at night, others say they warn. You sit down on a rock. It's warm despite the overcast sky. Steam curls from cracks nearby. You hear a soft pop gas releasing from a pool. But it sounds like a whisper, and the sulfur, it's stronger now, clings to your hair. Your eyes sting. You blink. You think you see movement. At the edge of the fumaroles, just a flicker, a shadow. But then it's gone. You blink again and realize the wind has stopped. No birds, no bugs, no sound. It's like the mountain is holding its breath. You stand, slowly, respectfully, because this place remembers everything. The grief, the prayers, the promises made and broken. The gods who were thanked, the gods who were ignored, and the people like you who came looking for answers. Some found them, some never left. So you take one last look at the lake bubbling quietly. You bow, and you walk away, not because you're afraid, but because you were noticed. The forest here doesn't want to be found. You wouldn't even know you were near it, if not for the stories. There's no sign, no clear path, just dense cedar trees packed so tightly the sunlight barely makes it to the forest floor. The ground is soft with old moss. The air, still, too still. You're in Aomori Prefecture now, deep in northern Honshu. And somewhere, hidden in the folds of these trees, lies a village, or used to. They call it Sugisawa, but good luck finding it on a map. Try asking a local, and you'll get the same answer every time, never heard of it. Their eyes might flick to the side, their voice a little too casual, but the message is clear. Don't ask again. Others might lean in, whisper a warning, then change the subject entirely. And that's when you know the story is real. Not because of what they say, because of what they won't. According to legend, Sugisawa was a small settlement nestled in the hills during the Edo period. Just farmers, craftsmen, quiet people living quiet lives. Until something happened. No one agrees on what. That's the thing about stories like this. They're always blurry at the edges. But one thread remains constant: death. A lot of it. All at once. Some say it was a massacre. That a man once a samurai, now broken by war or madness, snapped. He killed dozens in one night. Men, women, children. Some say it was a cursed blade. Others say it was grief. Or worse, joy. He laughed, they say, right to the end. Other versions shift the blame. Maybe it was a sickness, a fever that drove the village mad. Maybe the villagers turned on each other. Maybe the land itself rebelled. The mountain angry at being carved into. Whatever it was, the aftermath was so horrific that the village was erased. Literally. Records scrubbed, maps redrawn, officials ordered not to speak. Signs put up not with explanations, but with a single warning. Entry prohibited. Danger. That's all. The forest grew back fast. Too fast, some say. Swallowed the paths, buried the stones, left no trace of the people who lived there. But sometimes, just sometimes, the village comes back. Hikers have reported strange clearings that appear for no reason. Perfectly round, quiet, too quiet. No birds, no bugs. Just a heavy silence that presses against your ears like you're underwater. Others tell of paths that twist unnaturally. Trails that loop then vanish. GPS devices fail. Compasses spin. One moment, you're following a deer trail. The next, there's nothing. Just green walls on all sides. And the crushing realization that you're not lost. You've been led. Some see structures, just glimpses. A roof through the trees. A torii gate overgrown with vines. A well with no rope. But when they try to approach, the forest pulls away. Or, worse, swallows the memory. One moment, you're walking toward a clearing. The next, you're standing somewhere else, confused with 20 minutes missing from your watch. And then there's the cold. People report a sudden drop in temperature even in summer. Breath visible in the air. A sense of weight behind the eyes. Like something is pushing from the inside out. A few say they hear voices, not whispers, not shouts, just crying, far away. Then suddenly too close, cameras malfunction, batteries die. One group posted photos in the early 2000s showing what looked like a shrine gate, mossy, cracked, half buried. But when they returned a week later with better gear, gone. No gate, no clearing, not even the same trees. Just forest, just denial. Skeptics, of course, say it's all made up. Campfire stories inflated by the internet. Japan has thousands of ghost villages after all. One's abandoned due to population collapse or economic shifts. Why not invent a spooky one? Except No one ever says Sugisawa is just a story. No one. They avoid the name. They avoid the forest. And that's what makes it different. More fringe researchers believe the Sugisawa incident, whatever it was, left a kind of scar. A psychic wound so deep it altered the land. Like a bubble of trauma folded into the geography. Not a ghost haunting the village, but the village haunting reality. Some describe it as a liminal space, a place half here, half not. Only visible when certain conditions are met. When the fog's thick enough, when your intent is unclear, when you're alone, or worse, when you're not. Others suggest a displacement event. That the violence was so great it created a rupture, pulling Sugisawa slightly out of sync with the rest of the world. It's not gone. It's just elsewhere. Nearby, but unreachable. Like a memory you can't quite remember, but also can't forget. One researcher went so far as to map electromagnetic anomalies in the region. Found unusual readings. Local officials declined to comment. One even reportedly visited the researcher's home later that week to advise him politely, of course, to let the forest rest. Let the forest rest. It's not just the people who are silent, it's the land. And there's something about that silence that feels personal. You walk a little farther into the woods. The light fades fast here, the canopy thick. Shadows feel heavier than they should. You step into a small clearing, just big enough to notice. A depression in the earth, like a building used to be there. The moss is thinner here. The air is colder. You check your phone, no signal. You try to retrace your steps, but the path is gone. Or different. Or older. The forest tilts just slightly. You feel watched. Not hunted, not followed. Observed. You blink. And for a moment, just at the edge of vision, you see something. A shape. A roof. A lantern flickering behind slats. A flash of cloth. Then nothing. The wind picks up. You hear it in the leaves. But it doesn't sound like wind. It sounds like breathing. You're breathing. You don't run. You don't scream. You don't. Because if you do, if you break the silence, whatever remembers, Sugisawa will remember you too. So you walk slowly, carefully, and eventually you leave the forest. But part of you doesn't. It stays there, with the voices, with the village, with the silence that swallows names and waits for the next one. You walk across a bridge. Maybe it's in Kyoto, or Shikoku, or over a quiet river near Nagano, where no one remembers the original name. You don't notice anything at first. Just old stone worn smooth from centuries of feet. But halfway across, you feel it. The weight, not physical. Something older, heavier. As if beneath every step, someone else is still waiting. These are the bridges and temples and castles built on more than stone. They're held up by something colder. They call it hitobashira. It means human pillar. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. In Japan's distant past, in times of great construction or desperate protection, it was believed that offering a life, a living life as a foundation sacrifice, could stabilize a structure, ensure peace, please the spirits, keep disaster at bay, one life to protect many. The logic was cruel, sacred, unshakable, and perhaps not as rare as we'd like to believe. The most famous tale comes from Matsui Castle in Shimane Prefecture, a towering blackwood fortress built in the early 1600s, one of only a dozen original castles left standing in Japan, and according to legend, one that stands because of her. Her name was Oshizu, or Otsu, or Oiwa. The name changes. The details do not. She was chosen, or offered. It depends on the version. In some, she volunteered proud to give her life. In others, she drew the wrong stick in a lottery rigged from the start. However it happened, she was buried beneath one of the castle's central pillars, alive. The builders sealed the stone, continued construction, and this time, the walls held. No more collapses, no more storms, just silence. Some say she sang as the dirt closed in. Others say she cursed. That every spring her tears rise with the rain flooding the nearby moat, and so they built a shrine for her, just outside the castle walls, just in case. She's not alone. Similar stories ripple across Japan. Maruoka Castle tells of another woman, O-Iyo, sacrificed during construction. When her son drowned years later, locals said it was her revenge that she had become angry, that her spirit now controls the floods. The region still performs rituals in her name. It's not just castles, dams, bridges, watchtowers. Anything meant to last was believed to need more than timber. It needed spirit. And spirit, sometimes, had to be taken. You start to look at ancient structures differently now. The way some corners feel colder. The way a particular stone floor creaks not with wood, but memory. The way some shrines outside major fortresses don't bear names, just offerings. Was this ever real? Or just story? Historians argue. Some say Hitobashira was symbolic. That small effigies were buried. Clay dolls, prayers not people. Others insist the stories are exaggerated rural legends spun from fear and guilt. And yet, in 1965, repairs were underway on Matsui Bridge in Hiroshima Prefecture. As workers dug into the support pillars, they uncovered bones. Human bones. No official statement followed. The remains were quickly removed. An apology issued to no one in particular. A local priest blessed the site, but the whispers started again. Not just about Matsui, about all of them, because once you hear it, you can't stop hearing it. Every unexplained failure during construction. Every accident covered in vague wording. Every oddly placed shrine. Every section of stone that feels different. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That a bridge might carry more than traffic. That a castle might rise not just on defense but on silence. The concept of Hitobashira isn't unique to Japan. Across the world, in ancient cultures, similar practices existed. Servants buried with pharaohs. Children entombed beneath Viking halls. Stories of hearts bricked behind chapel walls in Eastern Europe. But in Japan, the tone is different. It's not punishment, not cruelty, it's duty. That's the part that unsettles the most. That these sacrifices were not always dragged. They were sometimes chosen. Let me be the one, some legends say. And the people wept, and the builders bowed, and the gods were pleased. You cross another bridge, older this time, narrow, stone rails, no nameplate. In the middle, the air shifts, colder, just slightly. You pause, look down, and notice how quiet the river is. No insects, no birds, just water and memory. Is it superstition? Is it architecture? Or is there still something beneath your feet? One researcher described Hitobashira as the architecture of fear. Not because it was barbaric, but because it worked. Once a sacrifice was made, the rumors kept people away. Thieves avoided bridges. Enemies hesitated. Communities stayed loyal. Fear became the mortar. And yet the ghosts remain. Visitors to old castles report dreams always the same. A voice calling from below. A woman behind a wall. A lullaby heard through stone. One guard at Himeji once claimed to hear footsteps beneath the courtyard. He said it sounded like pacing, measured, endlessly patient. He transferred a week later. These aren't ghost stories, they say. They're history that never got an obituary, that never had a grave, just names scratched into old wood, and the occasional blooming of flowers from cracks in the floor. You wonder now, when you see a building that's lasted for centuries, what held it up? Was it the stone or the silence? Was it physics or promise? You don't walk across old bridges the same way anymore. You listen, just in case. Because maybe somewhere deep in the foundation, someone else is still holding their breath and waiting. You see it before you feel it. A skeleton of concrete and steel rising from the tropical green of Okinawa, half swallowed by vines and time. Its bones stretched toward the sky like unfinished thoughts, arched doorways leading to nowhere corridors that collapse into dust rebar, clawing at the sun. The jungle has started to reclaim it slowly, lovingly. This is the Nakagusuku Hotel, and it's haunted, not just in the bad vibes kind of way. Not just local legend or late-night dares. No. This place feels wrong from the foundation up. Like something tried to grow here, and the land said no. You step inside and everything goes silent. The cicadas stop screaming. The wind dies. Even your thoughts start to slow down, dragged down by the air which is heavy and damp like a soaked blanket. Mold clings to the walls. The scent of rot and iron seeps from the cracks. Water drips steadily from a pipe that doesn't go anywhere. The hotel was never finished. It never even opened. Back in the 1970s, a businessman, his name varies, as it always does in stories like this, had a vision. A luxury resort. A getaway with panoramic views of the Pacific. Built right next to the revered grounds of Nakagusuku Castle, a 15th century fortress and sacred UNESCO site. That should have been the first warning. Locals raised concerns immediately. Monks from nearby temples begged the developers to stop. They said the land was wrong, spiritually impure, that ancient burial paths ran beneath the foundations, that the dead were at rest there and should be left that way. But developers don't listen to ghosts. Construction began, and from the start, things went badly. Workers were injured, tools disappeared, concrete refused to set properly, machinery malfunctioned. Night crews quit after reporting voices low, chanting distant footsteps, a woman crying in a room with no windows. One foreman claimed he saw figures standing perfectly still in unfinished hallways, just shadows at first, then clearer, then gone. Some workers refused to return. Others left Okinawa entirely. And then there's the most persistent part of the legend, the hotel owner. The ambitious man who insisted the warnings were nonsense, spent a night in the structure to prove there was nothing to fear. He was never the same again. Some say he emerged the next morning, silent, trembling, unable to speak. Others say he laughed too loudly, too long, then disappeared from public life entirely. Some say he was institutionalized. None of it was ever confirmed. What was confirmed, the project was abandoned. Money dried up. Investors pulled out. And the Nakagusuku Hotel was left to rot. No demolition, no repurposing. Just a corpse of a building slowly eaten by the jungle. But that's not where the story ends, because the hotel, for whatever reason, still breathes. Visitors report cold spots, even in the height of Okinawa's sweltering summer. Batteries drain instantly. Phones glitch. Shadows flicker. Photographers say their lenses fog inside the main stairwell, no matter the humidity. Some say you can hear laughter, or crying, or both. Others see things. Quick flashes, a face in a mirrorless frame, a hand on a doorway, a shape just around the corner that's no longer there when you move. Local taxi drivers won't take you there after dark. Some won't take you there at all. Not because of superstition, because they've been there, because something followed them home. There are theories, of course, rational ones. The structure is a magnet for urban explorers, thrill seekers, and filmmakers. Maybe all the stories are just suggestion, fear feeding itself. Maybe the site's decay and its proximity to ancient ruins creates a kind of psychological unease. You expect ghosts, so you find them, but then the details start piling up, like the blueprints that don't match the actual layout, like staircases that seem to shift between visits, like hallways that measure too long inside but too short from outside, like a single room, unnumbered, incomplete, where nothing grows. No vines, no moss, no rot, just bare exposed concrete, cold to the touch, no matter the season. Some say that room is the anchor. Others say it's the wound. And beneath all of it lies the castle. Nakagusuku Castle is a Ryukyuan fortress of curved stone and ancient prayer. Built with spiritual geometry, its walls trace ley lines and sacred intersections. The castle was designed to channel peace. The hotel slammed down beside it like a curse does the opposite. Some believe the hotel sits on a spiritual fault line where ancient burial grounds intersect with violent history. Remember, Okinawa was also the site of one of World War II's bloodiest battles. Tens of thousands died here. Soldiers, civilians, children. Many were never properly buried. The ground remembers. Some traditions say building over such land without ritual or permission creates Magi spiritual ruptures. Places where energy distorts, where reality bends, where memory and presence twist in unnatural ways. The hotel, they say, is not just haunted. It is the result of insult, a wound built into concrete. There are also stranger theories, ones that suggest the hotel was never meant to open, that its real purpose was never tourism, that its structure, its layout was designed to disrupt, that it's a modern experiment in sacred geometry reversal. A machine meant to unbalance, not house. Those theories are harder to prove, but harder to ignore the longer you stay inside. You climb a staircase. It spirals in odd directions. The view should show the sea. It doesn't, just more concrete and a dark hallway where the air feels heavier than it should. You feel it now. Pressure behind your eyes. The whisper of something too close. You turn a corner. There's a chair, a single rusted folding chair, facing the wall, as if someone was asked to sit and stay. You don't stay, because here, the walls remember. The jungle waits outside. The vines reach for every crack. Nature wants it back, wants to erase the scar, but somehow it won't go. The hotel resists, or something inside it does. You leave. Quietly, without speaking, without looking back. And you notice once you're in the car that your reflection in the rearview mirror lags by half a second. You don't look again, because some structures aren't just abandoned. They're rejected, and some ghosts don't haunt a place. They become it. You see him in the corners of old scrolls, in the margins of temple murals. His name whispered in incense smoke and scratched onto wood hidden behind shrines. A man, a magician, a shadow dressed in white robes. They called him Abe no Saime, and some say he wasn't entirely human. Born in the 10th century, during the Heian period, Saimai was officially a court onmyoji, a master of the yin-yang way. On paper, he was a government official, a specialist in astrology, geomancy, calendar making, and exorcisms, a kind of state-sponsored wizard. But that's just the cover story, because Abe, no Saime, wasn't just a learned man. He was something else. And according to the legends that refused to die, he still is. They say his mother was a kitsune, a fox spirit in human form. She lived among humans for years, married a man, bore a son, and then when her true nature was discovered, vanished in a flash of light, leaving behind a child with the ability to see what others could not. That child was Saime. From a young age, he could speak with spirits, see demons, understand the flow of energy through space. He wasn't taught this. He simply remembered. And by adulthood, he was Japan's most powerful spiritual figure. Saime advised emperors. He deciphered omens. He cast protective wards around the capital. He predicted eclipses and disasters. He banished yokai, healed the possessed, and walked between worlds as easily as a courtier walked through palace gates. But even now, his story feels off. Too sharp. Too detailed. His abilities too consistent. This wasn't mythology grown over time. This was something else. Something the records never quite explain, like how Saime never seemed to age. How his enemies, those who questioned his authority, died under strange circumstances. How his seals, talismans, and spells still work 1,000 years later if performed correctly. And how his name still makes priests lower their voices when they speak it near shrines. Even now, you can visit Saime Shrine in Kyoto, built on the site of his former home. The grounds are immaculate, the air oddly crisp. The 5-pointed star Simei's personal crest is etched into every lantern gate and talisman. But this is not the pentagram of the West. This is the Seimin, a symbol of perfect elemental harmony, balance, control, power. And people come here not for history, but for protection. You see them in the mornings, salarymen in suits, students before exams, mothers with children. They touch the sacred stone, whisper prayers, slip paper amulets into their wallets. They don't all believe, but they don't not believe either. Because Simei isn't just a character in a scroll. He's a presence, and some say he never died. He simply stepped sideways, disappeared into the liminal folds of the spiritual world, still watching over Japan, still holding the balance. And occasionally, they say he comes back. There are reports, always soft, always uncertain, of a man in white robes appearing before accidents, offering quiet advice, giving warnings in dreams. One woman claimed Simei appeared at her bedside the night before the 1995 Kobe earthquake. Another, a child in Nara, described meeting a man who spoke with his hands, not his mouth, and turned into mist. Clever stories. Lovely folklore. But then there's the Dojoji incident, an ancient temple in Wakayama Prefecture, famous for its cursed bell. In the 18th century, renovations uncovered scrolls sealed beneath the foundation. One fragment included a ward, a type of spiritual boundary, signed not with a name, but with a 5-pointed star and 3 characters, Abe no Simei. Ink analysis dated the scroll to over 500 years after his death. How did it get there? More confusing. Why was it still warm? Some say that Simei, or those who carry his legacy, never stopped working. Because the Onmyoji tradition, the yin-yang masters, didn't vanish. It went underground. Even now, a handful of spiritual practitioners claim to be part of Simei's lineage. They perform purification rites in private, passed-down secret rituals orally, and guard forbidden scrolls that were never meant to be seen. One such ritual involves the use of shikigami, invisible, familiars, bound spirits that serve the summoner. Saimei was said to control a dozen of them at once. They were his eyes, his messengers, his guards. Some stories describe them as paper dolls, animated by breath. Others say they were shadows, neither living nor dead, inhabiting physical forms when needed. And still today, shrines near Kyoto report finding folded paper figures nailed to trees. Offerings left in odd numbers. Circles of salt around small stones. Why? Because some doors remain open. And Simei's magic wasn't just ritual, it was design, the placement of buildings, the orientation of temples, the structure of entire cities. Saimei was said to have helped plan it all, using geomantic principles to protect Kyoto from disaster. And when the pattern is disturbed, when people build, without regard to the old energy lines, bad things happen. Fires, collapses, ghosts. And sometimes, the restoration of Saimei's protections stops them. Coincidence, maybe. But architects in Kyoto still consult on Myoji texts before major renovations, just in case. And here's the part that doesn't get discussed. Often Saimei's tomb. It's marked, accessible. But no one opens it, not because they can't, because they won't. The legends say it's sealed with 5 layers of protection, that anyone who opens it without permission will suffer madness, then misfortune, then fire. No one wants to test it, not even the boldest, not even the doubters, because Saimei's story isn't finished. Not really. He may be a myth, a folk hero, a symbol, or he may still be waiting beneath Kyoto, between worlds, hand on the balance, watching to see which way it tips, and occasionally, just occasionally stepping in. You're in a quiet museum now, somewhere in Mie or Nara, or maybe tucked into a basement archive in Iga, the birthplace of whispers and shadows. The lights are soft. The air smells like dust and paper. And before you lies a book, bound in fading leather, its edges worn to velvet by centuries of careful hands. The pages are thin, yellowed, but strong. On them are diagrams. Some look like maps, others like spells. There are knots, poisons, disguises, illusions, instructions written in a careful slanted hand. This is the Bansen Shukai, the sea of myriad rivers merging, the ultimate ninja manual, compiled in 1676 by Fujibayashi Yasutake. It's the closest thing we have to a complete record of ninjutsu, the art, the science, the psychology of Japan's most mythologized figures. It's also strange because it doesn't read like a warrior's diary. It reads like a blueprint for invisibility, a philosophy disguised as a field manual, and buried within it, between the pages on silent movement and smoke bombs, are passages that feel older, odder, almost arcane. But let's start with what we know. The Iga and Koga regions, nestled in Japan's mountainous heart, were historically isolated, hard to conquer, hard to find. The perfect cradle for an independent culture, one that valued intelligent subtlety and survival over brute strength. The ninja, or shinobi, were not mystical assassins in black pajamas. They were spies, saboteurs, scouts, masters of infiltration, deception, and escape. Mercenaries sometimes, rebels other times, occasionally monks, occasionally monsters. The Bansen Shukai documents it all. There are chapters on how to move silently in water or across gravel, how to scale vertical walls using rope loops and bamboo pegs, how to blend into towns disguised as traveling priests or blind beggars, how to fake a haunting using mirrors sound tubes, and glowing insects. But alongside these are sections on astrology, hand signs, energy flow, the placement of one's breath, the use of ritual and rhythm to weaken the will of an enemy before a single weapon is drawn. That's where things get murky, because the ninja weren't just practical, they were spiritual, and the Bansen Shukai doesn't separate the two. It describes 9 secret mudra finger positions designed to protect the body's sharpened focus or call on unseen assistance. It talks of walking backward through doorways to avoid detection by spirits. It lists herbs used not only for poisoning, but for inducing visions. Historians argue over how literal these passages are. Were the ninja truly invoking the kami, or just creating a psychological edge? But some sections defy easy categorization, like the ciphered portions, lines written backward coded references, poetic riddles that don't fully translate. Scholars believe some of these were meant only for certain readers, perhaps even only for members of Fujibayashi's own clan. One passage reads, "The eye sees not by light but by pattern, and the pattern is a lie." Another, "The 9th wind turns the blade away. The 10th wind speaks your name." What does it mean? No one knows, and some pages are missing entirely, torn out or replaced with blanks. Ink traces suggest something once written now wiped clean. Others are said to exist only in oral form, passed down from master to apprentice, never written. Knowledge too dangerous to record. And here's where things go from odd to impossible. There are persistent rumors, never verified, always whispered, that certain techniques described in the Bansen Shukai simply shouldn't work. One, for example, outlines a method of slowing one's heartbeat to the point of appearing dead for hours. Another suggests inducing hallucinations in multiple people simultaneously using only smoke rhythm and gesture. In 1981, a Japanese martial arts historian attempted to replicate one of the sensory confusion techniques using instructions from the manual. After months of testing, he reportedly succeeded in creating an illusion of multiple figures in motion without mirrors or assistance on a foggy night trail in Iga. His assistant described it as like watching someone split into 3 shadows. The footage has never surfaced. And then there are the shadows themselves. Multiple accounts from the Edo period to the early 20th century describe encounters in rural Japan with men who moved without sound, vanished into leaves, or walked up vertical walls. Modern interpretations dismiss these as folklore, embellishment, theater, but they line up uncannily with entries in the Bansen Shukai. One passage discusses the shadow step, a movement designed to pass unseen even under a full moon. Not by becoming invisible, but by manipulating attention breath and the rhythm of nearby sound. Modern psychologists refer to this as cognitive misdirection. Ninja called it disappearing. Some theorists, fringe, certainly believe the Bansen Shukai is more than a military text, that it encodes a form of psycho-spiritual technology, a practice so deeply rooted in rhythm, environment, and perception that it functioned like a form of applied illusion, bordering on the mystical. They point to parallels in other traditions, the trance dancing of the Sufis, the sensory manipulation of Vedic warriors, even the dream-walking techniques of certain Siberian shamans. And they ask, what did the ninja really know? Because unlike samurai, whose code was built on visibility, honor-presence hierarchy, the ninja perfected absence, silence, the manipulation of fear, of expectation, of reality itself. And the Bansen Shukai, that was their grimoire, or their user manual. So what does it mean that it still exists? That it's studied, taught, even practiced in some preserved dojos scattered across the country, not as cosplay, but as continuity. And perhaps that's the strangest part of all. That something built on invisibility has never quite disappeared. You close the book. The room is quiet, but behind you, maybe there's a soft movement. Nothing solid, nothing threatening, just the suggestion that someone else was here and left no trace. There's a well, just a simple stone circle tucked into a shaded courtyard beside one of Japan's most beautiful castles, Himeji, the White Heron. Tourists pass it without a second glance. It doesn't stand out. No grand torii. No signs with gilded lettering. Just moss creeping along old stone water that reflects no light, and a small wooden barrier around its edge. And if you lean in too close, you might hear it, counting. Ichi, ni, san, shi, go, roku, shichi, hachi, kyu, then silence. Because the 10th plate was never found, and her spirit still hasn't stopped looking. This is the legend of Okiku, the woman in the well. One of Japan's most enduring ghost stories. A tale of betrayal, murder, and eternal sorrow that refuses to fade, etched not only into kabuki plays and temple walls, but into the very foundations of Himeji Castle itself. And it starts like many tragedies with loyalty. Okiku was a maid, or a servant, or a spy, depending on the version. In most, she worked in the service of a samurai, sometimes noble, sometimes cruel. Her duty to care for a set of 10 precious plates, rare porcelain, family heirlooms, and then one went missing. She searched, desperately, night and day. Every room, every corner. 9 plates, only ever 9. The samurai accused her of theft. Others say he framed her trying to force her into a relationship, or to silence her after she overheard treasonous plans. When she refused, he chose punishment. Some say he beat her. Others say he tied her up and threw her down the well. She died alone, afraid, broken. But she didn't stay gone. That's when the counting began. Every night her voice rose from the depths of the well. Soft, monotonous, never angry, just relentless. Ichi, ni, san. It was never a scream, never a moan, just the unbearable sound of someone trying to make sense of a world that betrayed them. Over and over and over, always stopping at 9, always waiting for anyone to hand her the 10th plate. And that's where the story should end if it were just a ghost tale. But it doesn't, because strange things have happened near Okiku's well for centuries. In the Meiji period, workers tried to relocate it to clear room for landscaping. Within weeks, 2 died in sudden accidents. One fell from scaffolding in perfect weather. Another drowned in 2 feet of water. The project was abandoned. In the 1920s, a group of university students camped near the well to prove it was just a myth. One had a breakdown and never returned to school. The others refused to speak about the experience, except to say they would never again laugh near that place. Today, the well remains untouched. You can visit it. You can peer inside, but locals won't. They know better. Historians trace the earliest mentions of Okiku to the early 1600s. Her story was first dramatized in a kabuki play, Bancho Sarayashiki, The Dish Mansion, at Bancho. It was a sensation. Audiences wept. The play was revived again and again, updated with new settings, new villains, new motives. But Okiku never changed. She always counts. She never forgives. Over time, the story spread beyond the stage. People began reporting similar hauntings in other wells across Japan. The name Okiku became shorthand for a particular kind of ghost onryo, a spirit driven by injustice, bound by grief. But it's Himeji that holds the original well, and it's Himeji where the air still bends strangely near that corner of the castle. Visitors describe chills, camera glitches, feelings of being watched. Some say they hear dripping when there's no water. Others swear the counting begins only once they've walked away just loud enough to draw them back, always stopping at 9, never 10. And then there's the academic debate. Was Okiku based on a real person? The records are thin. But one theory holds that the legend began as a folk memory of class injustice. A servant punished for a mistake that wasn't hers. A woman betrayed by power. Over time, her sorrow became a story. The story became a warning. And the warning became a haunting. But then again, there's the other theory. That Okiku was never a servant. That she was a priestess. That the well itself was once part of a ritual site long before the castle existed. And that what she guards is not a missing plate, but a boundary. In this version, the 10th plate wasn't broken or lost. It was taken by someone who wanted power, and Okiku's spirit rose not out of grief, but duty, to prevent something from crossing over. The counting, they say, is not madness, it's maintenance, a ritual that keeps the space sealed, that if ever she reaches 10, if ever the count is completed, the seal will break, and the thing below will be free. That theory never made it into the textbooks, but shrine keepers still leave offerings at the well. Not flowers, not food, numbers, little paper charms with the number 9 written on them. Always 9, never 10. You stand at the edge now just far enough that the rope doesn't sway. You look down. The water is still, reflective, but it doesn't show your face, just the sky. And somewhere below, a voice that isn't yours begins to whisper, Ichi, ni, san. You don't wait for 9. You step back and you walk away, because even if you don't believe, some part of you does. The part that knows not all echoes are empty, that some voices are still counting, waiting, listening for someone to answer, and praying that no one ever does. If you go to Yotsuya at night, you might catch the light differently. Tokyo surrounds it now. Steel neon taxis humming past convenience stores. But there's a corner near the old shrines where the air thickens, where the wind slows just enough to notice, and a low chime tinkles even when there is no breeze. They say that if you walk by Oiwa Shrine after dark, you might see a glow hovering just above the ground. Not from a lantern, not from streetlight, but something else, small, pale, drifting. You try to look directly at it, and it vanishes. But if you turn your head just slightly, it lingers, a soft blue flame. They call them Hitodama spirit lights. Wandering souls shaped like floating orbs. Not fire, not gas, not tricks of the eye, but grief made visible. And here they come back to one name, Oiwa. Her story, like all tragedies, has changed over time. It's been softened, retold, turned into plays and films and cautionary tales. But the core of it remains as sharp as ever. Oiwa was a wife, loyal, beautiful, devoted, and betrayed. Her husband, often named Yemen, grew tired of her. Ambitious, cold. He wanted to remarry, to rise in the world, but Oiwa stood in the way. So he gave her poison, slowly, secretly. Day by day she grew weaker. Her face twisted, her skin sagged, one eye drooped. Her beauty, What had once defined her in the eyes of others melted away. And when she learned the truth, she died. But her spirit didn't. It rose, misshapen, vengeful, relentless. In the classic kabuki play, Yotsuya Kaidan Oiwa's ghost haunts Yamun, not with screams, not with fire, but with presence. He sees her in mirrors, in lanterns, in the faces of other women. Her ruined visage reflected back at him over and over until his sanity unravels like thread through a broken needle. He tries to escape. She follows. He kills others by mistake thinking it's her. But it's never over, not even now, because the story refuses to stay on stage. It bleeds into the shrine, into the street, into the light. Actors who perform Yotsuya Kaiden without first paying their respects at Oiwa's shrine report misfortunes, accidents, illnesses, lost voices, financial ruin. Entire productions have shut down after multiple cast members suffered unusual injuries. One director famously had his house burned down the night after filming wrapped. Coincidence? Maybe. But most directors don't take the risk anymore. They visit the shrine. They bow. They leave flowers, just in case. Because Oiwa is no longer just a character. She's become a symbol of vengeance, of truth revealed too late, of what happens when someone refuses to be erased. And then there are the lights. They've been reported for over a century long before electricity buzzed through Tokyo's veins. Small luminous orbs drifting near the shrine, especially during humid summer nights. They pulse, glow, then vanish. Some are white, others blue-green. Some witnesses describe them as cold not in temperature, but in feeling, as if the light doesn't warm the air, it empties it. Scientists offer explanations. Phosphorescent gases, swamp lights, electrical phenomena, optical illusions caused by urban moisture trapped in light pockets. But those don't explain the patterns. The lights appear where sorrow lingers, in corners, on thresholds, near the water basin, where people leave coins and prayers. And always, always just out of reach. You're standing there now. The wooden shrine is humble, weathered, surrounded by trees that lean a little too far inward. Bells hang quietly beside paper fortunes, many yellowed by time, untouched by wind. You step closer, and something shifts, not visibly, but within. The air presses against your chest, not to harm, just to remind. You're not alone, not forgotten, not the first to come searching for something you didn't know you'd lost. And maybe something is searching back. It's not always malevolent. Some say the lights are not warnings but messages, that Oiwa's grief wasn't born from hatred but pain, that the Hitodama are pieces of that pain still echoing, looking for understanding. Not revenge, recognition. Because what is a haunting really? It's not always terror. Sometimes it's memory with nowhere to go. Sometimes it's love that was never heard. Sometimes it's justice with no voice. Others believe something stranger, that the lights are not ghosts, but echoes of people. Not their spirits, their emotions. That when something breaks, truly breaks in the human heart, it leaves a mark. Not visible, not measurable, but real. And sometimes, if the air is right, and the place is charged, and the silence is deep enough, it glows, just for a moment. You close your eyes, the city sounds fade. All you hear is a faint chime, somewhere between the wind and memory. You open your eyes. There it is, floating just a foot above the stone path. A soft flicker, pale and cold, and impossibly still. You reach for your phone, lift it. The screen glitches, freezes, then crashes. Of course, You look again, and the light is gone. Just trees now, and the steady creak of an ema board swaying in air you can't feel. You step back, bow once, not too low, just enough to say you saw it, and you walk away. Behind you, a soft whisper rises, not in anger, but in release, as if someone was counting on being seen. And for once it starts with steps, uneven, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrim feet. You count them without meaning to 1, 2, 30, 100, and still the path rises, twisting through tangled brush and pine needle silence. The air grows thinner, cooler, more still. By the time you reach the top, your legs ache, but you don't care, because they're nestled into the flank of a sacred mountain in Shingu. Overlooking the sweeping Pacific coast stands Kamakura Shrine. It's not large, not grand, but behind it, rising from the earth like the back of some ancient creature, looms a stone. A massive stone. They call it Gotobiki Iwa, the frog rock. Towering, symmetrical, weathered, but still unnaturally perfect. It doesn't belong here, and yet it's been here longer than the shrine itself, longer perhaps than the mountain. And according to legend, this is where the gods first descended. Tensun Korin, the heavenly descent, a cornerstone of Japan's national mythology. The story goes like this. The sun goddess Amaterasu sent her grandson, Ninigi no Mikoto, down from the heavens to bring order to the earth. He landed on this very spot, Gotobiki Iwa, and from there Japan's divine lineage began. The emperor's bloodline, the regalia, the very framework of sacred kingship, all trace back to this moment, this place. But there's a problem. It's barely mentioned in the Kojiki, or Nihon Shoki, Japan's oldest imperial chronicles. No elaborate descriptions, no poems, just vague allusions, as if the most important site in the nation's mythic birth was deliberately understated. And that's where the mystery begins, because Kamakura Shrine is real. You can visit it. You can stand before the rock. You can feel the gravity it exerts on the world around it. But what you won't find are the full records, the detailed rituals, the lineage of priests, the historical archives. They're missing or erased. Some say they were destroyed in a fire during the Muromachi period, though no formal record of that fire exists. Others claim the documents were removed, relocated to Mount Koya, or buried in hidden libraries of Kyoto, but no such volumes have surfaced. What we do have are fragments, a few scratched scrolls, half-remembered liturgies, mentions of a kanjo rite once performed at the shrine, a spiritual descent into darkness followed by symbolic rebirth in the presence of the stone. What did it mean? No one knows. The rite disappeared sometime before the Edo period. No priest alive today can explain it fully, and no government official seems eager to investigate. The stone watches, the stone waits. Some call it a megalith, a sacred marker used by ancient people long before Shinto or Buddhism ever arrived. Others go further, suggesting it's a natural geological formation, but perfectly aligned to solstices. And still others, those few who write in the margins of research journals, propose that Gotobiki Iwa is not just a symbol, it's a key, a focal point for something deeper, because surrounding it are signs of a forgotten structure. Stone bases, pathways that vanish under moss depressions in the earth that suggest walls, gates, thresholds. Nothing conclusive, nothing provable, but it feels like the remnants of a temple, or something older than temples, a place of convergence, and that convergence runs deep. Kamakura Shrine is part of the Kumano Sanzan, a sacred pilgrimage route that has drawn emperors and peasants alike for over 1,000 years. The other two shrines, Kumano Hongu Taisha and Kumano Nachi Taisha, are better known, better preserved. But it's Kamikura that carries the silence, the weight. Pilgrims speak of dreams that change after visiting the shrine, of a strange stillness that settles over them days later, like dust on the soul. Some report glimpses of robed figures at the edge of the forest trail. Others see nothing but leave, with the feeling that they were observed, not judged. Just, cataloged. The stone takes stock. And then there's the festival. Every February, locals gather for the Shingu Oto Matsuri, the fire festival. Hundreds of men dressed in white robes race down the ancient staircase from Gotobiki Iwa carrying torches. The path lights up like a river of flame, a ritual of purification and renewal. But no one really knows where the tradition began. Some say it predates Shinto. Others whisper it honors an older presence, one that required appeasement, not worship. That the fire is not just symbolic, it's protective. Because Gotobiki Iwa, they say, is not asleep. It's just waiting. And perhaps it remembers things we've forgotten. Stone tablets, found nearby bear inscriptions that don't match standard Buddhist or Shinto iconography. Circular motifs, repetitive spirals. One depicts a figure, not human, not beast, kneeling before a stone. Hands outstretched. No explanation. No known context. And always the same direction, facing the rock, as if asking permission. So why is so little said? Why does the government leave Kamakura out of national tourism campaigns? Why do textbooks gloss over its significance with a single sentence? Some say it's respect, others say it's fear. Because if this really is the landing place of the gods, if the founding myth is rooted here in stone, then what else might be? And what happens if someone wakes it up? You step closer to the rock now. The shrine behind you is quiet, empty. The wind stirs just once and then disappears. No birds, no insects. You rest your hand on the stone. It's warm, not sun warm, body warm. You pull back, not in fear, but in understanding. This is not an artifact. This is an interface, a place where the world we walk intersects with the one beneath. And standing here, you remember something you never knew. That the gods never left. They're just very, very quiet. Until they need to be heard. At first they looked like just more rocks. Scattered, uneven, sun-bleached stones buried beneath layers of silt and coral. Divers off the coast of Okinawa near the island of Yonaguni noticed them by accident in the 1980s. Massive flat surfaces, right angles, tiered steps carved into the seafloor. The ocean should have smoothed them over millennia ago, but these were still sharp, clean, geometric, impossible. They called it the Yonaguni Monument, a submerged stone structure stretching over 300 feet in length and rising 90 feet from the seabed. Walls, stairways, ramps, pillars. But who built it? And when? That's where things get strange. Because the structure lies 25 meters beneath the surface, which means it would have been above water at the very latest 10,000 years ago. That's before the rise of ancient Mesopotamia, before Egypt, before the first farmers in the Yellow River Valley. That's so far back, Japan didn't even exist as an island. Yet it was still connected by land bridges to the mainland. And yet here's this thing. Not just a rock formation, but a site. A site that looks like it was carved deliberately by intelligent hands. You can see the pattern's perfect 90-degree angles, carved paths, and towering megaliths arranged like an amphitheater or a ziggurat. In one section, There's what looks like a throne surrounded by steps that lead nowhere, a monument to nothing or to something we've forgotten. Some researchers, like geologist Masaki Kimura, argue the site is man-made, that this was once a temple or a city built by a prehistoric civilization lost to rising seas after the last ice age. Others, especially more mainstream geologists, dismiss it. They say it's a natural formation, a quirk of tectonics and sandstone, that people are just seeing what they want to see. But even skeptics admit it's weird, too precise, too structured, too anomalous, and it's not alone. Okinawa is dotted with mysterious relics, tools, ceramics, and stone implements that date back 30,000 years or more, far older than any known Japanese civilization. The Minatagawa Man, one of Japan's oldest human remains, was found in a limestone quarry nearby dated to 18,000 years ago. But these tools, some suggest, they weren't even used by anatomically modern humans, which raises a bigger question. Who was here first? One artifact found near Yonaguni has markings that don't match Jomon pottery, the earliest known culture in Japan. Instead, they resemble petroglyphs found in Siberia, or, in some cases, the megalithic carvings in Peru. Coincidence, perhaps, but it doesn't explain the tools. In 2010, a group of amateur divers retrieved a collection of stone blades, unlike any documented in East Asian archaeology. The edges were sharpened in an odd spiral groove pattern. The stone not native to Okinawa. No one has come forward with a clear explanation of what they were used for or who made them. They now sit in a private collection, labeled unknown. And then there's the echo. Some divers, just a handful, have reported hearing strange humming underwater near the monument. Not machinery, not whales, tone. A low, sustained vibration that seems to resonate in the chest. One diver described it as standing inside a bass note. Another claimed the sound made him feel calm, too calm. Disoriented, but at peace. He lost track of time. Emerged 2 hours later, thinking only 20 minutes had passed. No recording of this sound exists, because it never shows up on audio equipment, just memory. And maybe that's the key, because some theories suggest the Yonaguni monument wasn't just a temple or fortress. It was a device, an amplifier, a ritual space designed to manipulate energy or sound. Similar ideas have been proposed about the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, even Göbekli Tepe. The shape, the scale, the resonance, it all points to a forgotten purpose, not a tomb, but a conductor. If that's true, then the sea didn't just drown history. It buried a technology. But why here? Why Yonaguni? Look at the currents. The island sits at the confluence of oceanic paths that stretch toward Taiwan, the Philippines, and Southeast Asia. It would have been a trade hub, a spiritual crossroads, a perfect place for a seafaring culture to rise and fall. Some even link it to Mu, a lost continent, said to have existed in the Pacific, swallowed by the ocean in a cataclysm. The idea is dismissed by most archaeologists, but local legends tell of land bridges and kingdoms that once spanned these waters. And here beneath the sea is their ghost. The government remains largely silent on Yonaguni. No official excavation, no formal protection. Divers are allowed but discouraged. Researchers are few. Funding is scarce. It's as if no one wants to look too closely, as if the answers are inconvenient. Because if the Yonaguni monument is real, truly human-made, then everything we think we know about Japan's prehistory is wrong, very wrong. It would mean Japan's first civilization wasn't in the Jomon period, but thousands of years earlier. that people here were capable of advanced engineering long before the pyramids, that the sea didn't just erase villages, it erased a civilization, and not with a whimper, but with a wave, rising tides, shifting continents, and memories too deep to surface. You stare at the monument through the diver's mask. The water presses around you, sound vanishes, the light dims, and all you see is the shape, a perfect platform lined like stairs leading to something that no longer exists. You reach out, touch the stone. It's cold, not ocean cold, absence cold, as if the warmth of memory was scraped away, and only silence remains. You surface. The sky is bright. The island is still. But the questions follow. Who built this? What did they lose? And why does the ocean feel like it's keeping a secret? You walk into a temple expecting serenity. Soft incense bamboo water fountains the hush of reverent footsteps on polished floors. You expect the kind of peace that floats above time, wrapped in the smell of cedar and the quiet breath of old gods. But in Kyoto, in a handful of sacred halls tucked into the corners of this ancient city, the floors tell a different story. They whisper, and they bleed, not in metaphor, not in drama, but in the faint reddish-brown stains that mark the ceiling boards of certain temples, stains shaped like footprints, handprints, and smears. You look up and feel a shiver, because those aren't paint. They're blood, real blood, dried, darkened, pressed into the wood like a fingerprint you can't clean away. They call them Chitenjo blood ceilings, and they are exactly what they sound like. These are not accidents, not battle damage. These are ceilings constructed intentionally from the floorboards of a fallen castle. Boards where warriors died. Boards that remember. To understand them, you have to go back to 1600, to the waning days of Japan's Sengoku period, a time of chaos warlords and fractured power. At the heart of the story is Fushimi Castle, a fortress near Kyoto, built by Toyotomi Hideyoshi and later fortified by Tokugawa Ieyasu. In 1600, just before the pivotal battle of Sekigahara, Tokugawa left a garrison of 2,000 men inside the castle to hold it as a strategic distraction. They were betrayed. Enemy forces swarmed the castle. Outnumbered and outmatched, the defenders fought to the last. When defeat became inevitable, many chose to commit seppuku ritual suicide rather than be captured. So many died that the wooden floors of the castle were stained with blood. After the castle was destroyed, these blood-soaked boards were salvaged, not discarded, not burned, but repurposed into temple ceilings. A gesture of respect, a memorial, a warning. You can still see them today. In Genko-an Temple, Yoganin, and Shunji, among others, visitors are welcome to look up and see the dark streaks and stains. Some even say they can spot distinct forms, a curled foot, a splayed hand, a face forever imprinted in agony. No artist rendered these. They are what remains. But the question is, why put them in ceilings? Some say it was simply practical. Wood was scarce, the boards were still strong, but others argue the gesture was deliberate, that placing the blood above was symbolic, lifting sacrifice into sacred space, making memory part of the roof. So it would always be overhead, always watching. The monks at these temples do not treat the ceilings with fear. They pray beneath them. They teach children beneath them. They speak of courage, not curses, of loyalty, not ghosts. But the air under those ceilings feels different. Even in summer, it's cooler. Still, as if the boards are listening. Some visitors report nausea, others sudden stillness. Some, especially children, claim to hear faint sounds, rustling cloth, dragging footsteps, the echo of steel on steel. There's no audio, no proof, just silence and stain. Historians debate the accuracy. Some argue that the blood stories were added later, romanticized by temple lore, that what we see might be discoloration, not trauma, that there's no chemical analysis confirming blood proteins. But then again, no one's allowed to scrape the ceilings. Too sacred, too dangerous. You begin to see a pattern, because Japan doesn't always mark death with gravestones. Sometimes it uses space, rooms, floors, gates, doors. Hauntings here aren't always loud. They're imprints, and nowhere is that more literal than in these ceilings. One priest said, "It's not that the spirits are trapped, it's that they're present." There's a difference. One haunts, the other remembers. And the memories extend beyond the temples. Other locations in Kyoto hold similar whisper steps, worn smooth in places no feet should tread. Walls with names etched so faintly you only see them at dusk. Entire gardens designed to disorient the senses, to slow time, confuse direction, compel reflection. The city is a clock of ghosts ticking softly under your shoes. And those ceilings, they're the bell tower. Some scholars believe the blood ceilings may have been installed as a kind of moral compass, reminders of loyalty duty and the price of conflict. During the Edo period, peace was enforced by memory, not law, not weapons, but by stain, by the knowledge that the last war was costly and the next would be worse. You stand now beneath one such ceiling in Genko-on. The tatami mats are pristine. The garden outside glows with moss and maple leaves. Everything is peaceful, but you look up and you see it, a smear trailing across two beams, wide at one end, tapered at the other. A hand reaching, or recoiling, or already too late. You try to imagine the man who left it, what he thought, what he felt, whether he knew he'd become architecture, and then soft footsteps. Not yours, not anyone's. Just the floor creaking gently once. Then silence. The boards are still, but your breath is not. You step outside. The sun feels brighter than it should. You don't speak, because these ceilings do, and they've said enough. You've seen her in the old prints, maybe in a museum, or tucked away in the corner of an ukiyo-e woodblock, her face serene, her kimono elegant, her long black hair drifting behind her like a curtain of ink. At first glance, she's just another courtesan, another figure from Japan's floating world. But then you look again. Her neck, it's stretching, not a trick of perspective, not an artist's flourish. It snakes upward, far above her shoulders, curving like a willow branch in the wind. Her head leans down from above, watching herself sleep. She is Rokuro Kubi, the long-necked woman, and once you've seen her, you can't unsee her. The legends are old, very old. But unlike many yokai Japan's myriad of strange creatures and spirits, the Rokuro Kubi feels different. Less like a monster, more like a metaphor. The story goes like this. By day, she's normal. A wife, a servant, a geisha. She eats, smiles, works, walks through the world like everyone else. But by night, her true form emerges. Her neck stretches. Her head lifts, floats, wanders. Sometimes it lingers near her own body, whispering to it. Sometimes it drifts through walls, observing others, seeking something unnamed. And sometimes, though rarely, it bites. But that's not the part that unsettles you. What gets under your skin is the idea that she doesn't know. Many Rokurokubi have no memory of their nightly transformation. They sleep soundly, unaware that their spirit, tethered only by a fragile thread of neck, has wandered into the world until someone sees them, or worse, until they see themselves. In some versions, the neck detaches entirely. These are called nuka-kubi, a separate, far more dangerous entity. The head floats freely, often attacking or screaming through the night. But the true Rokurokubi is more subtle, more tragic. She's not trying to haunt, she's trying to return. So where did this come from? Folklorists trace the earliest stories to the Edo period, though hints may go back further, hidden in regional oral traditions. Some say the idea was imported from Chinese legends of roaming spirits. Others argue it arose naturally from Japan's own social fabric, because during the Edo period, women were often confined by role, by expectation, by duty. They were to be loyal, quiet, composed. But inside something stirred, longed, reached, ached. And what is a Rokurokubi if not the perfect metaphor for invisible yearning? A part of you that stretches when the world isn't looking, one that watches, that remembers, that refuses to rest. Some anthropologists go even deeper, linking the legend to sleep paralysis, lucid dreaming, and dissociative identity. The feeling of floating outside one's own body, of waking to find yourself in two places at once. Modern psychology meets ancient myth, but others, the old priests, the rural families who whisper of strange movements at night, believe the Rokurokubi is very real and dangerous. They say the transformation isn't random, it's punishment. The result of breaking a taboo, committing betrayal, or harboring impure thoughts. Some say it's a curse passed down matrilineally, mother to daughter, across generations. You might never know you have it, until one night you wake up gasping, your neck burning, with strain, your pillow soaked, and a strange taste in your mouth. Was it a dream? Was it you? One tale tells of a merchant's wife who began to feel odd after her husband returned from war. Each night, she awoke more tired, more agitated. Then one morning, she saw the bruises, long round marks around her neck. The servant saw her first, sleeping in the garden, her body on the bench, her face peering down from the eaves. The servant fled. The wife vanished days later. Her husband reported her as missing, but no one checked the temple roof. And the sightings continue. Rural inns have recorded guests waking to find a second head beside them in the dark, watching, curious, not cruel, just lost. One story from the Meiji era tells of a girl who sleepwalked each night. Her family followed her once and found her leaning over the river. Her neck stretched 30 feet into the mist, whispering to the water. She returned to bed the next morning, smiling, never knowing. Even today, certain small towns in Gifu and Tottori hold quiet ceremonies during Obon to honor wandering neck spirits. They burn paper talismans shaped like coils, leave offerings of rice balanced atop long bamboo poles, not for the dead, for the restless. Because here's the twist: the Rokurokubi doesn't want to harm you. She wants to rejoin you. Her curse is not rage, it's division. She is a creature split in two, the self that obeys and the self that watches, the mask and the mirror. And that makes her all the more haunting, because haven't you felt it? That strange sense that you're not alone, even in your own skin, that your thoughts are not quite yours at 3:17 a.m., that some part of you is watching from just behind your shoulder. She lives there, not in the woods, not in the shrine. In the moment when your body lies still and your spirit stretches. You finish your tea at a countryside inn. The owner thanks you. You compliment the garden. She smiles politely, and for a second, just a flicker, you think her head tilts too far, her neck too long. But then she's back, smiling, offering you slippers for the stone path. And you wonder, will she remember you? Or will she wake tomorrow, neck-sore dreams, foggy unaware that something in her left the room last night and watched and listened and whispered your name just once to see how it felt? You step off the ferry and the air changes. It's not just the humidity or the salt or the thick curtain of mist that seems to hang in the trees. It's the silence, the kind that hums behind your ears like something vast is listening, waiting. You've arrived on Yakushima, a remote island south of Kyushu, wrapped in clouds and soaked in rain nearly year-round. The place seems too green for the real world. The moss grows on everything. Trees twist into impossible shapes. Rivers run clear and cold and fast, and every step you take feels like trespassing on sacred ground, because it is. This is not just a national park. It's a memory, an ecosystem that has barely changed in thousands of years, a landscape where time grows slow and thick and strange. And in the heart of it all are the cedars, towering ancient trees that defy imagination. Some are over 1,000 years old. Some, like the legendary Jomon Sugi, are older than the pyramids of Egypt. They grow on ridges, and in ravines, branches curled like grasping hands. Their bark ripples with the years gnarled and furrowed, as if each decade left behind a signature. These are the trees that remember, and some say they do more than that. Locals speak of the Kadama spirits that live inside the trees, guardians of the forest. Invisible but present, not malicious but not indifferent either. If you enter with respect, they may leave you be. If not, the forest lets you know. You hear it in the sudden drop of bird call, in the chill that runs through your arms, even in midsummer, in the path that vanishes, though it was clearly marked 10 seconds ago. People have gone missing in Yakushima. Not often, but often enough. And when they're found, if they're found, they speak of losing track of time, of walking in circles, of hearing voices in a dialect they don't understand. One hiker rescued after 2 days alone insisted she had only been gone for hours. She claimed a woman in white walked with her the whole time. When asked what the woman said, she only replied, "She wasn't speaking to me. There's no cell service deep in the forest. The trees are too dense. The cliffs too jagged. The rain too constant. Your senses adjust. Sound distorts. Light shifts. And soon, you don't know if you've walked 5 miles or 50 feet. The island reshapes your awareness, and some believe it reshapes you. Japanese mythology places deep spiritual importance on forests. Trees are considered dwellings of kami, not just spirits, but conscious forces. And Yakushima is one of the most sacred forests in the country. Even before Shinto, before Buddhism, this place was revered, not for its resources, but for its presence. And there's something else. The locals don't talk about it often. Not to visitors. Not unless you've earned their trust. But sometimes, after enough tea and enough silence, they'll tell you about the trees that speak. Not in words, not in whispers, in feeling. Hikers describe standing beneath a particularly large cedar and suddenly remembering something they had forgotten for years, a childhood scent, a face they hadn't thought of since high school. Others break down in tears for no clear reason. One man claimed the tree made him forgive someone he hadn't seen in decades. He didn't say what for, He just said the tree told him it was time. There are theories, of course. Scientists talk about phytoncides, organic compounds released by trees that reduce stress and improve mood. Others point to the microclimate, how humidity and altitude alter perception. But that doesn't explain the patterns. The trail cameras that sometimes show movement in the trees when no wind is blowing. The photos that come back with strange light patterns, vertical bands, circular glares that don't match any known artifact, or the compass readings that skew just slightly near certain groves. There's a term in Japanese Shinrin-yoku forest bathing, the practice of immersing oneself in the forest not for hiking or exercise, but for restoration, to listen, to absorb. Yakushima is where the term becomes a command. You don't conquer this place, you surrender to it. And it watches. The Jomonsugi is the island's most famous tree, estimated to be between $2,000 and 7,200 years old. Think about that. It was growing before Japan was Japan. Before writing, before shrines, before stories, and yet it remembers them all. You can't touch it. Not anymore. There's a platform set back to protect the roots. You stand there in the mist, watching this impossible thing emerge from the moss and fog like a living mountain. You don't speak. You don't want to. The silence feels like a contract. A few feet away, another tree has fallen its trunk, hollowed out by time. Inside it, children play lovers, whisper tourists pose. But even here, in laughter, there's reverence. Because you can't be in Yakushima for long without feeling seen, not surveilled, witnessed, as if the island is memorizing you, as if it's deciding whether to let you take something back. And here's the part that lingers. Some visitors report dreams after leaving. Not nightmares, not visions, just a presence. Trees that speak in emotion. Forests that walk. Rain that follows you home, not wet, not falling, but humming at the edges of your thoughts. You can still smell the cedar, even after the flight. You wake up with soil under your nails, though you haven't gardened in weeks. You find yourself stepping more softly, speaking less, listening more. That's how Yakushima changes you. Not with spectacle, with memory. Not yours. It's you leave the island. The ferry engine rumbles. The mainland appears on the horizon, but you feel it even then, the eyes in the trees. Not angry, just awake. You're walking along a beach in Shimane Prefecture, and the sand is oddly coarse, grainy dark, littered with pebbles that seem too round, too smooth, too deliberate. The waves roll in lazily. The wind hums through the pines, and there it is, a perfectly shaped mound of sand, just a few feet high, capped with white paper streamers and a thin rope. No sign, no explanation. Just sitting there untouched, as if the tide knows better than to reach it. This is Izumo, and it may be the oldest, most sacred stretch of land in Japan. It's quiet now, but once a year, the silence breaks. In October, the gods gather here. All of them. You might think that's metaphor. A poetic flourish. But in the Shinto calendar, this is no small holiday. It's a literal divine assembly. The month is called Kanazuki across most of Japan, meaning the month with no gods. Because during that time, they're all said to leave their local shrines and make their way to one place, Izumo Taisha, the grand shrine of Izumo. Here it's called Kamirizuki, the month with gods, because they're all here. The oldest records of Izumo Taisha predate written history. Some believe the shrine's foundations were laid during the Yayoi period, possibly as early as 1500 years ago. Others argue it goes even further back to an oral tradition that speaks of divine contracts, ancient pacts, and cosmic negotiations. And unlike other major shrines like Ise or Fushimi Inari Izumo, doesn't just house a god. It's said to host the meeting of gods. The deity enshrined here is Okuninushi, the lord of the unseen god of nation-building agriculture medicine, and most interestingly, relationships, not just romantic ones. All relationships, fate, bonds, connections, and it is he, according to legend, who convenes the assembly. Each October, a sacred rite unfolds. The gods from all over Japan, great and small, are welcomed with a series of rituals. Temporary lodgings are set up along the coast, small altar-like shelters made from straw and pine. They face the sea. The waves are said to carry divine presence ashore. Once here, the gods enter the shrine's hidden inner sanctum, and for 7 nights they meet to determine the fate of the coming year. No one is allowed to hear what they say, but those who walk the grounds during this time report strange occurrences. Shifting shadows at twilight, lights moving across the woods with no torchbearers, sounds soft, chanting rhythmic drumming that stop the moment you focus. The shrine itself is massive, towering. Its main hall, the Honden, is among the tallest wooden buildings in Japan. Thick, twisted ropes, shimenawa, hang from the eaves, heavy with spiritual energy. One alone weighs several tons. They aren't decorations, they're boundaries, ropes that separate the human from the divine, that mark sacred space, that say, do not cross unless invited. And beneath those ropes, people pray. Not just for health or wealth, but for connection. To be known. To be remembered. To be tied to something or someone beyond themselves. Because in Izumo, fate isn't just written in stars. It's negotiated. Okuninushi is a curious god. In some stories, he's a trickster. In others, a gentle healer. He was once killed several times, actually only to return. He gave up rulership of the earth to the heavenly line of Amaterasu's descendants, and in return was granted this land. Izumo is his, but what's fascinating is what's missing. Unlike other major shrines, Izumo's foundational myths aren't recorded in full detail. The Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, Japan's official mytho-historical texts, devote only sparse lines to this place. Key elements are vague. Important names are omitted, almost as if the record was intentionally shortened. Some historians believe Izumo's myths represent a parallel tradition, a competing origin story, to the more dominant Amaterasu narrative. That before Japan unified under the Yamato court, there were other kingdoms, other gods, other truths, and that Izumo kept them quietly, respectfully, but completely alive. Archaeological digs around the shrine have uncovered enormous pillar bases, far larger than needed for the current structures. Some estimates suggest the original main hall may have stood 48 meters tall, making it taller than any pre-modern wooden building ever constructed in Japan. Why so high? To reach the gods, some say. Or maybe to allow something down. And yet, the structure was gradually scaled down over centuries. Each rebuild shorter than the last. Today, it still towers, but not as it once did. Almost like someone was slowly trying to fold it back into the earth. But the reverence hasn't diminished. Every October, thousands of people line the beach watching the ritual fires burn. They don't see the gods arrive, but they know the timing, the moon, the tide, and they listen to the silence that comes after the flames, to the feeling that someone is watching, but not in judgment, in memory, in recognition. You walk the outer grounds of the shrine. The gravel crunches underfoot. Trees, older than dynasties, sway overhead. The wind smells like cedar and salt. You approach the prayer hall. Here, unlike at other shrines, you clap 4 times twice for yourself and twice for your other half, wherever they may be, even if you haven't met them yet, even if you never will. Because in Izumo, fate isn't passive. It's relational. It's a knot you tie together. Some say, if you sleep on the sand near the old shrine foundations, you'll dream of someone else's life. A fisherman, a child, a priest, a stranger, and that they'll dream of you just once, enough to form a thread, enough to pull a soul toward yours across a lifetime, or 10. You look out at the sea. The waves are gentle tonight, but they carry more than salt and sound. They carry arrivals, and somewhere out on the water, someone is stepping onto shore, someone ancient, someone familiar, and the shrine waits, as it always has. It's not a town anymore. Not really. Not since the sirens stopped and the roads were left to crack under creeping moss. Not since the clocks froze in place and the vending machines stood quiet with their blinking out of order signs like tombstones. You're walking through Okuma, one of the towns closest to Fukushima Daiichi, and even though it's been years since the disaster, it feels like time hasn't restarted. The 2011 earthquake was brutal. The tsunami that followed was devastating. But the meltdown at the nuclear power plant, that was different. That was invisible. And invisible things linger. Even now, a vast area surrounding the plant remains a no-go zone. Miles of shuttered homes, abandoned schools, and towns locked in a kind of radioactive limbo. The government has reopened some districts, but others, they're still caught in a state between evacuation and memory. And here's where the mystery begins, because people are reporting things, not radiation sickness, not conspiracy theories, encounters. Stories have emerged over the years, some quiet, some whispered only to journalists who listen long enough, of strange figures seen walking through the exclusion zones, of people in full protective gear encountering others not wearing suits, just standing in yards, watching. When approached, these figures vanish. Thermal imaging doesn't pick them up. Security drones fly past them without registering motion, but witnesses insist they were there. They're always standing still. And then there are the phantom lights. Late at night, inside the abandoned zones, researchers have recorded moving points of light. No source, no heat signature. Some drift horizontally. Others rise, suddenly vanish, then reappear 20 meters away. Drones equipped with LiDAR detect changes in air pressure near these phenomena, slight but measurable. Some believe these are electromagnetic anomalies caused by radioactive decay and ionized air. Others aren't so sure, because the patterns don't feel random. They feel intentional. One former cleanup worker, who chose to remain anonymous, described hearing whispers in the abandoned gym of an elementary school. Nothing distinguishable, just syllables repeated rhythmically. He removed his helmet to listen more clearly. The sound stopped. He put it back on and heard them again. He was reassigned 2 days later. Some say the spirits of those who perished in the disaster are still trying to communicate. Others believe something deeper is happening, something more primal. Because before it was a nuclear site, Fukushima was already known for its folklore. Mountains that swallowed people. Rivers with names translated as no return. Shrines to gods of fire, not peace. Legends of Ubasut, the practice of carrying the elderly into the hills to die when times were hard. This land has always held ghosts. Now, they've just become more modern. Taxi drivers in nearby cities like Nami and Itate have reported picking up passengers who vanished during the ride, leaving behind nothing but damp footprints and a fogged window. One driver recalled a young woman in a thick coat who asked to be taken to a destroyed address. When he explained the area was off limits, she simply said, "It used to be home." He turned around to respond. She was gone. The meter was still running. And here's the part: no one talks about the silence. There's a hush in the exclusion zone that isn't natural. No birds, no dogs, just the sound of wind and the occasional drone whirring above. Even the insects seem quieter. It's like the land is holding its breath, waiting. Some researchers have begun cataloging unusual plant growth patterns, moss that fluoresces faintly at night, trees bending toward structures that haven't stood for years, entire groves that seem to bloom out of season as if confused by time. But most unusual, the mirrors. Multiple reports have surfaced of residents returning to their long-abandoned homes and finding mirrors turned backward, not broken, not fallen, just gently reversed to face the wall. In Shinto tradition, mirrors are sacred. They reflect truth. They hold kami, the divine. So when they're turned, it means someone or something doesn't want to be seen. Whether it's shame, sorrow, or something else, the gesture is deliberate. One former resident who returned to his family home swore the house was untouched except for a single mirror in his grandmother's room. It was wrapped in cloth and tied with twine made of seaweed. No one in his family had ever done that before, and no one could explain it. So what's happening here? Some say it's just trauma, that the human mind faced with overwhelming grief makes ghosts out of silence. Others argue it's memory embedded into space. That places carry resonance, and trauma sharpens it into something people can feel, can see, can follow home. But a few those on the edge of belief suggest something else entirely, that the disaster in tearing open the earth also tore the boundary between worlds, that the radiation didn't just contaminate soil, it awakened something. Ancient energy, forgotten sorrow, dormant watchers. They point to patterns in the radiation plumes that resemble Shimenawa ropes, sacred barriers in Shinto, used to cordon off holy spaces. They point to how the exclusion zones mirror old boundaries between feudal provinces or ancient ritual lands never meant to be settled. And they ask, what if the meltdown didn't cause the haunting? What if it released it? You walk through the town now. Grass breaks through the asphalt. School books still lie open on desks. A cracked phone dangles from a charging cable like a relic from another life. And everywhere stillness. You pause beside a mirror that faces the wall. You don't touch it. You don't need to, because you feel it already. The weight of presence, not judgment, just recognition. The kind that says, you survived, but not everyone did, and not everything stays buried. There's a tunnel in Japan where no one honks their horn, not because it's illegal, not because of manners, but because somewhere along its damp, echoing length, people say the sound doesn't come back, or worse, it comes back wrong. Welcome to Kiyotaki Tunnel, just outside Kyoto. A narrow stretch of crumbling concrete, barely wide enough for one car at a time, surrounded by dense forest. On paper, it's unremarkable. Built in the 1920s, only 444 meters long, still in regular use. But by night, it becomes something else entirely. A passage, a place where the boundary between where you are and where you've been starts to feel unstable. Let's start with the number 444. In Japanese numerology, the number 4 is pronounced shi, which also means death. Triple it, and you don't just have a bad omen. You have a death sentence carved into the architecture. Coincidence, maybe. But the tunnel has other issues. Drivers report strange encounters. Figures in the road that vanish upon approach. A woman in white, walking against traffic, with her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Phantom footsteps echoing behind lone pedestrians. One man claimed that when he drove through with his windows down, he heard someone breathing just behind his headrest. He was alone in the car. Others speak of time shifts. A journey that should take 1 minute stretching to 5, or shortening inexplicably. One couple claimed their digital dashboard reset to 0 the moment they entered the tunnel and wouldn't restart until they exited. Even GPS fails inside. But the real stories, they're older. According to local legend, the tunnel was constructed using forced labor prisoners and wartime captives who died during the digging process. Their bodies, it's said, were never removed. They became part of the foundation. The workers were never properly mourned. No rites, no prayers, just poured over, with concrete smoothed out, forgotten. And the land, it remembers. Some claim the tunnel was built on top of an ancient execution ground where criminals and political prisoners were beheaded during the feudal era. Locals speak of finding fragments, old bones, rusted chains, even bits of tattered cloth uncovered by heavy rains in the hills above the road. Official records are sparse, redacted, but it's enough to keep the stories alive. Some visitors claim the tunnel's length changes depending on your guilt, that those who've done wrong spend longer inside. Others say there's a mirror hanging at one end, not to help drivers, but to trap spirits. If you look into it at the wrong time, you might not see yourself. You might see what's waiting. Several paranormal investigators have attempted overnight stays. Many left early, not because of noises or apparitions, but because of the pressure, a sense of being watched from all directions, as if the tunnel walls are lined with eyes just beneath the moss. And sometimes, even after leaving, the feeling follows. One investigator reported finding handprints on his car windshield the next morning on the inside. No fingerprints, just greasy smears, as if someone or something had been trying to reach out while he drove home. Still, skeptics argue it's just the mind playing tricks, a confined, poorly lit space. Urban legends passed down by locals. Your brain fills in the blanks. But here's the twist. The urban legends aren't the same. Unlike other ghost stories, where versions eventually converge, the tales about Kiyotaki Tunnel evolve. Each person tells it differently. New details appear, then vanish. It's as if the tunnel customizes its haunting, tailors it to you. One woman said she heard her mother's voice calling her name from the walls. Her mother had been dead for 10 years. A man saw a shadow waving at him from the far end, and it wasn't until later he realized the silhouette was of his own body, facing the wrong direction. And then there's the clock. Some visitors report malfunctioning timepieces. Watches stop. Phones freeze. One biker said his smartwatch logged an elevation change of over 2,000 feet while he was inside. Impossible. The tunnel doesn't slope. It barely bends. What if it's not elevation? What if it's something else shifting? Like reality. One theory suggests Kiyotaki Tunnel is a thin place, a spot where multiple timelines or layers of reality intersect, where trauma geography and memory collapse into a single pressure point, like scar tissue on the map, and something about it pulls at the seams. Others say the tunnel acts like a trap, not for cars, for emotions, regret, anger, sorrow. Travelers carry their burdens inside and sometimes leave them there. But emotion doesn't just evaporate, it pools, it thickens, it listens. And what do you call a place saturated with forgotten pain? You call it haunted. Still, people drive through every day. Tourists come. Teens take selfies. Locals roll their eyes, but no one honks, no one lingers. And if your engine stalls halfway through, you don't open the door, you don't turn around. You sit, you breathe, you wait for the tunnel to finish with you. Then only then you leave. And if your mirrors seem fogged on the outside, let them stay that way. Because some reflections are better left unseen. The mountain doesn't look angry, not at first. It looms quietly in the distance, capped with snow. In the winter, ringed with forests that shift with the seasons. Children draw it in classrooms. Poets compare it to sleeping gods. Tourists take filtered selfies from every angle. But you standing at the base, you can feel it. That steady hum beneath your feet. Mount Fuji isn't just a mountain. It's an obsession, a canvas, a symbol of national identity, a place of pilgrimage, and according to more than one tradition, a doorway. You probably know the polite version, the cultural icon. Japan's tallest peak, a perfectly symmetrical stratovolcano, last erupting in 1707. Thousands climb it every year. They bring prayers cameras, the determination to touch the sky. But beneath that beauty, beneath the snow and ash and ritual, there's something else, something older. Because Fuji isn't just sacred, it's feared. Let's start with the mythology. Mount Fuji has long been associated with death, specifically the afterlife. In ancient Shinto and Buddhist syncretic beliefs, the mountain served as a spiritual barrier, a place souls pass through on their way to other realms. And it's not just metaphor. Dainichi Nyorai, the cosmic Buddha, was once believed to reside within the mountain's heart. Pilgrims didn't just climb Fuji. They circled it, meditated on it, addressed it not as a thing, but a presence. In some sects, the crater at the summit was seen as the eye of the world. But eye of what? And who's looking back? Let's talk about the caves. The Fugaku Wind Cave, the Narusawa Ice Cave, the Lake Saibat Cave. Fuji's flanks are riddled with volcanic caverns formed over thousands of years. Most are mapped. Some are open to tourists. You'll see neat signs, boardwalks, flashlights for rent, but a few aren't marked on any map. One such cave located in a dense section of Aokigahara Forest was discovered by accident during a 1990 geological survey. Its mouth had collapsed and hidden by undergrowth. The entrance was eventually excavated and then quickly reburied. Unofficial reports from the team described geometric walls, acoustic anomalies, and a persistent feeling of descent despite the angle of elevation. No official record was published. The forest was sealed. Locals called it a kindness because Fuji's forests have another name. You've probably heard it whispered, Aokigahara, the sea of trees. A forest so dense and so still that wind doesn't pass through it the same way. Compasses misbehave. Sound travels in strange patterns. Moss grows in spirals. It's beautiful. It's deadly, and it has a reputation. As Japan's most infamous suicide site, each year, signs are placed along trails urging visitors to reconsider, to call their families, to remember they're not alone. Volunteer groups sweep the area regularly looking for people, or for remains. The numbers aren't public anymore, but the stories remain. And what's strange, what chills the spine, is how often those found leave no notes, no explanation, as if drawn by something wordless. Some spiritualists believe Fuji exerts a pull and emotional gravity, that the volcano is more than geological, it's spiritual, a mass of compressed longing, sorrow, and rebirth. Others go further. They suggest Mount Fuji is not just a sacred space, but a node, a convergence point of spiritual and dimensional lines. Japan's version of Glastonbury, of Mount Shasta, a place where the skin between worlds thins, where travel between realms, between selves, is possible. There are legends of monks who disappeared into its caves and emerged decades later unchanged, of pilgrims who reached the summit and wept not from exertion, but from recognition, as if they had been there before. One story tells of a farmer in the Edo period who ventured into a lava tube to retrieve a lost goat. He returned days later, speaking a dialect no one recognized, wearing clothes stitched with unfamiliar thread. He died within a week. The local priest burned his body and never spoke of it again. But the cave was sealed. Even modern hikers report anomalies. A persistent, one-time confusion. Watches that jump ahead by hours. Phones that reset to factory settings upon descent. GPS trails that zigzag into nonsensical shapes, like someone wandered in circles when they swear they walked a straight path. And then there's the lights, seen often in the upper reaches of Fuji's flanks, especially near the Fujinomiya Trail. Hikers have captured strange orbs hovering above the ground. They flicker blue or orange, move in silence, then vanish. Skeptics blame drone enthusiasts, but some of the lights date back to Meiji-era woodblock prints. They've always been there, waiting. Fuji's last eruption, the Hoei eruption of 1707, covered Edo, modern-day Tokyo, in ash. But it wasn't lava that terrified people. It was the sound. Multiple diaries speak of roaring voices from inside the mountain, of bell-like tones echoing across valleys, of whispered syllables no one could quite interpret. Today, seismologists monitor Fuji constantly. She hasn't stirred much lately, but the land around her, it shifts. Subtle tremors, animal migrations, strange cloud formations. One researcher described a repeating seismic signature like a breathing pattern deep below the cone. And here's the final twist. In 2017, a group of climbers took a drone up to record the crater. Nothing unusual until they reviewed the footage. In 3 separate frames, just before the drone banked to the right, a figure appears, tall, white-robed, motionless at the edge of the summit. No tracks. No one else was registered at that altitude that day. The footage was quietly removed from YouTube, but copies circulate. People claim it's a monk. Others say it's a spirit. But those who've stood at that spot before say one thing: there's no space to stand there. So what is Mount Fuji? A volcano, yes. A shrine, certainly. But maybe also a lens, a place where the boundary between landscape and memory wears thin, where sorrow collects, where prayers don't rise up but down into the earth. And maybe, just maybe, they're answered. There's a house in Tokyo you won't find on any tour map. No plaques, no brochures, no carefully labeled exhibits with softly lit artifacts and polite music. From the outside, it looks like any other narrow, 2-story wooden building tucked between high-rises and power lines. The kind of place you pass by without a second glance. But inside, they say time folds in on itself. It's known, if it's known at all, as the Sankei Building, a post-war structure that was once used as a tenement, then a small office, then abandoned. And then something changed. Nobody knows exactly when the rumors began. The details always vary, but the shape of the story stays the same. Someone enters and doesn't leave the same way. Not physically, not emotionally, not spiritually. They come out changed, or not at all. Urban explorers talk about the Sankei Building like it's cursed. They post shaky videos on message boards, half-lit tours with red arrows and circled shadows. They whisper about missing time, looping stairwells, and rooms that rearrange themselves when you're not looking. One video shows a man walking down a hallway lined with cracked wallpaper. He opens a door to what appears to be a bedroom. He walks in. The camera cuts briefly, less than a second of static. When it comes back, he's walking into the same room again from the opposite side. The footage ends with him whispering, "I'm not where I was." He never posted again. Of course, skeptics chalk it all up to hoaxes, editing tricks, creepy storytelling. They say it's just an old house with a good legend. That psychological suggestion and the disorientation of low-light spaces do the rest. But here's the thing. The building doesn't stay the same. One explorer went back 3 times in 1 month. On his first visit, he found an old kitchen with 1970s appliances. On the second, the kitchen was gone, replaced with a tiled washroom, rust-stained and filled with broken mirrors. On the third visit, the entrance was sealed with ropes, white ropes, shiminawa, the kind used to seal sacred boundaries, or more specifically, boundaries you're not supposed to cross. This wasn't the work of city maintenance. This was ritual. And that's when the theories start spinning. Some claim the Sankei building sits on a keikai, a spiritual fault line, like a hole in the topography of reality. Not just haunted, but porous. A site where the veil between worlds is thinner than it should be. Think house as a knot in space. Time doesn't flow right there. Directions don't stay fixed. You enter a room from the east and leave through the west, only to find you're now facing east again. One woman claimed she visited the building with 2 friends in 2009. They split up to explore different floors. 10 minutes in, she called for them. No answer. She waited in the foyer for 2 hours. Then she stepped outside. They were already there and said she had never come in. They'd waited 20 minutes, then assumed she bailed. She still has a photo on her phone, a blurry image of herself in a cracked mirror inside the building. Time-stamped at 12:46 p.m. She exited at 12:44. People joke online that it's Japan's back room, a glitch in the simulation, a haunted architecture project that got accidentally wired to a spiritual battery and never unplugged. But the older locals, they say it was always wrong, that even before the post-war reconstruction, that stretch of land had a reputation. During the Edo period, a temple stood nearby. Not a grand one, just a small family-run jizo hall meant to honor the spirits of lost children. One year, they say a fire broke out, destroyed the temple and the surrounding block. But here's the catch: the fire was never seen, only heard. Witnesses described the roar of flames, the heat on their skin, the smell of smoke. But when they arrived, nothing was burning. Still, people died. Their bodies were found later scorched, but untouched by actual flame. No source ever confirmed. The lot remained empty for decades afterward, until someone built a house, and then another, and then the Sankei building, which seems to have inherited every trauma that came before. Some psychics believe the place doesn't contain a ghost, but rather a pattern, a repeating trauma that replays itself through architecture. That the walls have learned to mimic despair. That the hallways now remember how to confuse you. And worst of all, that they like it, because no one's ever found bodies inside, but they have found names, scrawled behind wallpaper, etched into door frames, names of people who never lived there, never registered, unclaimed. Some of them match those listed as disappeared during the 1945 Tokyo bombings. People who vanished not from explosion, but from sight. One theory suggests the building is a convergence point, a place where the living occasionally intersect with the dead in the wrong direction, not as haunting, but as navigation, a kind of spiritual alleyway. People don't go missing there, not exactly. They just turn wrong and don't come back. You pause at the building's exterior now. The windows are boarded. The gate is rusted shut. But you swear there's a flicker of movement behind the glass on the second floor, a curtain shifting, even though there's no wind. You raise your camera to take a picture, and the lens fogs instantly. No temperature drop, no breath, just fog. You don't wipe it off. You don't need to, because you already know this place has seen you, and it doesn't forget. So you back away, slowly, carefully, and maybe you notice that the sidewalk feels longer than it did a minute ago, and the light a little more yellow, like you've stepped not into the street, but into a version of it, just slightly wrong. You're deep into Tori Prefecture, now near the Sea of Japan, where the wind carries the smell of salt and the mountains cast long shadows across the rice paddies. The coast here is quieter, the kind of quiet that's been practiced, refined, held in place for centuries, and nestled along this forgotten stretch of shoreline carved into the cliffs like a secret that never wanted to be found is one of the most mysterious structures in Japan. Mitoku-san Sambutsuji, more specifically, the Nagire-do, the Thrown-in Temple, a tiny wooden hall built not beside the cliff or below it, but inside it. Embedded high up in a vertical rock face, seemingly impossible to reach, held in place with ancient timber and faith. There are no nails. There are no scaffolds, just woodstone and legend. How it got there, no one really knows. The temple's origin is officially traced to the 7th century, built by the legendary mountain ascetic Enno Gyoja founder of the Shugendo tradition, a mystical sect that combines elements of Shinto esoteric Buddhism and animistic mountain worship. According to folklore, Enno Gyoja used magic, literally throwing the structure into the cliff face, where it embedded itself perfectly. Hence the name Nagire-do, Thrown-in Hall. And when you see it with your own eyes, you believe it, because there's no visible path to the building. No modern tools could have placed it where it sits on a narrow ledge halfway up a crumbling wall of stone, no wider than a coffee table. The official trail stops well below it. Visitors can climb to nearby viewing platforms, but the Nagire-do itself remains untouched. Even monks don't enter it, at least not anymore. Those who've tried, they say strange things happen. One monk, who climbed the ledge decades ago, reported a sensation of being watched not from behind, but from within the cliff itself. He stayed inside for only minutes, then left, declining to ever speak publicly about the experience. The abbot at the time simply said, "It's not meant to be visited, it's meant to be there." And there it is. The woodwork is precise. The joinery is flawless. Some of the beams are held in place by notched stone, others by natural pressure and balance. Modern architects have studied it and come away bewildered. "It should have collapsed centuries ago," one engineer remarked in a 1998 interview, but it hasn't. It endures, and the longer you stare at it, the more questions emerge. Like, what exactly is it doing? Because this isn't just a shrine, it's a marker, a boundary post. Many believe it wasn't constructed to house prayers, but to seal something in. That the temple isn't a destination, it's a stopper in the side of the mountain. And if you remove it, well, better not to. There are stories, quiet ones, that before the temple was built, people vanished along this part of the mountain. that figures were seen stepping out of the cliffs during certain phases of the moon, that a nearby spring ran red for 3 nights in the year 629. No records were officially kept, just old songs, warnings disguised as poetry, and a lot of people moving farther inland. And no Gyoja was said to have battled demons during his time on the mountain. Not metaphorical ones, actual creatures of shadow and flame drawn to places where the world grows thin. He didn't destroy them, he bound them, and Sanbutsuji might be the lid on the jar. There are spiritual traditions in Japan that speak of spirit wells, natural points of intersection between the earthly realm and other planes. Some are benevolent, others are not, and some just old, too old to understand, but they still move, still breathe, still wait. In 2015, a small earthquake hit the region. Minor damage, no injuries. But the temple, untouched by centuries of weather and tremors, shook visibly. Witnesses from a nearby rest station reported hearing a low moan echo across the cliff face, followed by the unmistakable sound of wood shifting against stone. The Nagare-do remained standing, but something moved. And since then, visitors report new sensations. A warmth that rises from the rocks near the shrine. A vibration beneath their feet. A low hum. Inaudible to some but undeniable to others. Seismologists found no fault activity. But locals began placing fresh offerings outside the temple's viewing platform. Not for the gods, for balance, to keep things still. You climb now, slowly, carefully up the permitted path. You pass ancient markers, wooden gates, weathered silver statues of Jizo wrapped in red bibs and slowly eroding into moss. At the final gate, the trail ends. The Nagare-do is still far above, peeking out of the cliff like a secret eye. Watching, not inviting, just observing. The wind stills. The birds stop. And for one long second, you feel as if something very large just took a breath behind the mountain wall. Then nothing, just stone and sky. You bow gently, not out of superstition, out of respect, because whatever Sanbutsuji guards, whatever was sealed into that cliff 13 centuries ago, hasn't left. It just sleeps. And wood, after all, doesn't last forever. But legend, that endures. So you turn and walk back down the path, listening just in case for the creak of old timbers. And hoping you don't hear it, you're standing on a stretch of sand so wide and flat, it looks like it might go on forever. The tide is low. The sky is overcast. There are no footprints, no tourists, just wind water, and one thing that shouldn't be here. A gate, not just any gate. A torii, tall, crimson, perfectly proportioned, standing alone in the surf. Behind it, nothing. No shrine, no path, just ocean. This is Oarai Isosaki Shrine, perched on the coast of Ibaraki Prefecture. Its main complex is up the hill, nestled safely among pine trees and stone lanterns. But down here, on a rocky outcrop called Kamiso no Tori, stands this solitary structure. It's beautiful. It's strange. And according to legend, it's where the gods first stepped ashore. Kamiso means the shore, where the gods landed. Specifically, it's said that 2 deities, Onamuchi no Mikoto and Sukunahiko na no Mikoto, arrived here to begin shaping the land, curing illness, and teaching mankind how to thrive. They didn't come in lightning. They came quietly. They stepped as if through a door. And ever since, that torii has stood as a marker not of ownership, but of arrival. It is not a gate that welcomes you in. It is a gate that warns you where someone else already is. And here's where things start to feel unstable. Because people who visit the Kamaiso Torii sometimes report feeling watched, not in a threatening way, more like walking into a room where someone has just left. You feel the air still carrying their breath. You smell a trace of something unfamiliar. Sometimes you even hear it, the sound of sandals on wet stone. No one's there. You turn back to the parking lot, and the distance looks just a little too long, like you've crossed something, even if your feet stayed dry. And then you look at your photos. That's when the stories start. A figure in the background, a shadow on the edge of the rock shelf, a second torii gate reflected in the water, even when the tide was too low to reflect anything at all. Locals say it's just the kami. They're always nearby. But some visitors, especially those who come alone, tell a different story. They speak of dreams afterward, of gates in places that don't have doors, of walking endlessly toward a shore that keeps receding. One man said he dreamed of the torii every night for a month after his visit, only each time there was something standing in it. Not a person, not a ghost, just a shape, tall, still, watching. Another claimed she stood under the gate for a photo and heard her own voice whisper something back to her from the rocks. Only later did she realize she hadn't spoken. Let's pause here. Torii gates are sacred. In Shinto belief, they mark the boundary between the human world and the divine. You pass through them not casually, but ritually, with a bow, with intention. You don't walk through the center. That space is reserved for the kami. But Kamiso no Tori, there's nothing beyond it. No temple, no courtyard, only the ocean. So what happens when you walk through a gate that leads to nothing? Or worse, when that gate is already open? Some believe this particular torii wasn't meant to invite humans to a shrine. It was meant to keep something sacred from leaving. The gate is oriented not inland, but outward, facing the open sea, as if marking a boundary not just for visitors, but for gods themselves. And if that's true, then what happens when the tide recedes? What crosses then? Some visitors report feeling dizzy after standing near it. A few report time distortion watches slowing phones, desynchronizing by several minutes. One climber said she hiked to the main shrine afterward and found it had closed 2 hours before, even though she'd only arrived 30 minutes late. She checked her time-stamped photo of the torii eye. It was taken at 4:16 p.m. Her phone now read 3:05. The camera app wouldn't open again until she left the prefecture. Coincidence? Maybe. But here's another layer. The Kamiiso no Tori was rebuilt several times throughout its history. Most recently in the 1960s, after typhoons damaged the rock shelf. Each time it's rebuilt, a special purification ceremony is held Misogi Harai to cleanse the site of any energy that may have accumulated. But the current gate was restored during a period of solar eclipse, a rare alignment. And ever since then, more stories have emerged. Not darker, just closer. As if something on the other side of that gate has leaned a little further in. Some esoteric researchers believe the gate's location corresponds to an ancient dragon line, a flow of spiritual energy that runs beneath Japan's mountains and rivers, aligning with old shrines and sacred groves. They believe the Kamiso site is one of these junction points where energy wells up from beneath and can be interacted with directly, not metaphorically, literally. Others have mapped sonar anomalies just offshore. Unusual shapes beneath the waves. Cavernous formations that don't match the local geology. There's even a theory that an older submerged altar lies nearby, lost to time and tectonics. If that's true, then maybe the torii isn't isolated. Maybe it's just the visible part, the handle, to something bigger. You stand before it now. The tide is low. The wind cuts in from the east. The waves make no sound for a few seconds, just long enough to notice that your ears have adjusted to something missing. Then one sharp gull cry, and everything returns. You don't walk through the gate, you just look. And in the silence, you think about doors, about thresholds, about how you never really notice crossing them until they close behind you. You take a photo, just one. Later when you review it, the gate is there, empty, but on the water, right where the sea begins to shimmer. You swear there's a ripple, not caused by wind or tide, just a footstep heading out or maybe heading back in. You ride a creaking ropeway up into the clouds, watching as the forest below shifts from green to blue, then disappears entirely into mist. The wind rattles the car. Your reflection in the glass wavers. And then there it is, a mountaintop lake still as polished obsidian nestled in a volcanic crater. This is Lake Usori, deep in northern Aomori Prefecture. It is eerily quiet. Too quiet. The trees that ring the lake seem to lean away from it. The clouds hang low and gray, like they're afraid to float too high. The water doesn't lap, it rests, like something asleep, and near its edge, connected by a narrow path of worn stones, stands a wooden hall with a peaked roof and faded red pillars. Ozorezan, literally Mount Fear, one of the 3 holiest sites in Japan, and by far the strangest, because this is not a place where people go to worship the living. It's where they go to talk to the dead. Ozorezan has long been believed to sit on the border between worlds, the threshold between life and afterlife. In Buddhist cosmology, it represents the entrance to the underworld, echoing similar beliefs from Shinto and even pre-Shinto traditions. They say the souls of the dead gather here, and if you come during the right week in July, you can speak to them. The event is called Itako Taisai, a festival where blind mediums known as Itako, traditionally, women trained in ascetic rituals, enter deep trances and serve as mouthpieces for the dead. People line up for hours. Some clutch photos. Others bring offerings. A few carry nothing at all, just names etched into memory and longing. And when it's their turn, they kneel before the Itako, whisper the name of their departed loved one, and wait. The Itako begins to sway. Her eyes, usually closed, flutter beneath the lids. Her voice changes. Her tone shifts. And then, in a voice not quite her own, she speaks as them. People weep, not softly, but deeply, wailing, clutching the sleeves of strangers. Some walk away smiling, others collapse. Still, others return every year, hoping for more, just one more word. Skeptics call it performance, cold reading, a beautiful con shaped by ritual and cultural expectation. But those who've been, they don't care, because something happens here. Something unexplainable. It's not just the mediums, it's the land. The volcanic soil is pale gray, almost white, pocked with bubbling sulfur pools and steaming vents. The air smells like rot and electricity. You breathe it in, and it stays with you behind your teeth. Small statues of Jizo, the guardian of children and travelers, line the paths. Many are dressed in red bibs, some with wind chimes and pinwheels spinning madly in the still air. They're for the souls of unborn children. And when the wind gusts hard and sharp, you could swear the pinwheels spin against it. You keep walking past the statues, past the steaming pools, toward a narrow wooden bridge that crosses into the center of the lake's spiritual heart. The bridge is called Sanzu no Kawa, the Japanese equivalent of the river Styx. Crossing it, even metaphorically, is believed to mark your passage into the next world. But you're alive, right? You step onto the bridge. The wood creaks beneath your feet. You look out at the water, expecting to see your reflection, but the surface shows only sky. No face, no trees, just gray, as if the lake decided you didn't need to see yourself just yet. There are stories, of course. People who cross the bridge and come back changed. Not obviously, but subtly. One woman, a nurse from Sapporo, came to speak with her deceased mother. She said the Atako relayed a message only her mother could have known, a memory no one else shared. But when she returned home, she claimed her cat didn't recognize her. Not at first. It hissed, hid under the furniture. For days, a man in his 40s came hoping to contact his brother, lost in a car accident. He left Osarezen with a limp he couldn't explain. Medical tests showed nothing. But his sister swore she saw both men reflected in a store window days later, standing behind her, side by side. And then there's the Whisper Trail, a narrow path behind the main hall, barely used by tourists, lined with old stones etched in kanji, too worn to read. The wind never quite reaches here. It just circulates. Visitors report hearing voices, not words, but rhythms, breaths, repeated syllables. You walk it alone. Even if you came with someone, you walk it alone. By the time you finish, your name feels heavier, like it has company. In the evenings, mist rises off the lake. It pools between the trees and along the shore, settling like gauze over the Jizo statues. Locals call this the soul fog, because that's when the voices get louder. The Atako close their doors. The monks light incense and ring bells. And visitors are warned to stay indoors, not out of fear, but respect. The dead are more active at dusk. They're not malicious, but they're curious, and the line between you and them. Here, it's not a line. It's a breath. There are theories, of course, that Osarezen sits atop a unique geological fault, releasing gases that alter perception, that the water's high mineral content affects the inner ear, that the rituals tap into subconscious memories, unlocking emotion. But that doesn't explain the dreams. So many visitors report vivid, repeating dreams after leaving, of people they haven't seen in decades, of voices calling them by childhood nicknames, of seeing themselves but older or younger, or standing just across the bridge. And always the lake is there, still, watching. You return now to the edge of the water. The clouds are clearing. For a moment, the sky turns pink. The sulfur air warms just slightly. You kneel. Leave a coin for Jizo. Whisper a name, not too loudly, because here names have weight. And sometimes, when you speak one, it speaks back. There's a scroll in the Kyoto National Museum that doesn't make sense. At first glance, it looks like any other emakimono, an illustrated hand scroll from the 12th or 13th century. Ink and color on paper. Delicate brushwork. Classic calligraphy. A noble at court, perhaps, or a battle scene unfolding across the parchment in slow, elegant motion. But then you look closer, and you realize the battle isn't between armies. It's between objects, not humans, not animals, things, slippers wielding spears, sake bottles hurling hot liquid, smoking pipes swarming like insects. And in the middle of it all, a battered old umbrella swinging a sword the size of a fishing pole. You've just met the Tsukumogami, household items that have come to life. The scroll is called the Tsukumogami Emaki, and it depicts a bizarre uprising, discarded tools and utensils thrown away by their owners returning to seek revenge. It's absurd, comical, deeply unsettling. Because the idea isn't just folklore, it's theology. According to Japanese tradition, once an object reaches its 100th year, it may develop a soul. That soul doesn't appear out of nowhere, it's born from use, from memory, from interaction, from all the quiet moments when a broom swept the same corner for 50 winters, or a kettle sang through 5 generations. If you respect the object, it might become benevolent. But if you throw it away thoughtlessly, it might come back. In Edo period Japan, this belief blossomed into an entire class of yokai supernatural entities with very specific personalities. There's Karakasa Obake, the one-eyed umbrella ghost who hops around on a single leg sticking out its long tongue. There's Biwa Boku Boku, a haunted lute that plays eerie melodies in the dark. And Chochinobake, the lantern with a gaping mouth that floats along rooftops like a paper jellyfish. They're funny at first, until you realize what they mean, because at their core, Tsukumogami are about attachment. About how nothing, absolutely nothing, stays inert forever. Everything you touch, everything you live with, carries a trace of you, and eventually, it remembers. The scroll itself is a satire, of course, a parody of court life, mocking how people valued status over meaning. But the fear is real and still present. Even today, some temples hold kuyo ceremonies, ritual memorials for broken or worn-out objects, especially needles, combs, brushes, and dolls. Items that once served a purpose, that once knew your face. At Hokyoji Temple in Kyoto, there's an annual service called Harikuyo, where women bring their old sewing needles and rest them in soft blocks of tofu. It's not a joke. It's reverent, because those needles gave their strength and now deserve rest. At a Washima shrine in Wakayama, hundreds of old dolls are lined up for farewell rites. Not burned, not discarded, honored, because everyone knows you don't throw them away. You release them. There's something strangely modern about the Tsukumogami despite their ancient roots. In an era of fast consumption, throwaway tech, and lost relationships with physical objects, the idea that your phone might one day whisper at you because you never said goodbye suddenly feels less absurd. After all, who hasn't felt that twinge when donating an old jacket, or the hesitation before deleting a playlist that kept you company during a breakup? We know these things aren't alive, but still, we hesitate. And in Japan, that hesitation has a name, a shrine, a ritual, a yokai. One story tells of a merchant who threw out an old mirror. He'd had it since childhood, a gift from his grandmother. It cracked. He tossed it in the trash. That night, his dreams were filled with reflections, not of himself, but of versions of himself he'd never been. A samurai, a monk, a beggar. The mirror showed him not his past, but every life it had absorbed from his daily glances. In the morning, the mirror was back on his windowsill, uncracked. He placed it gently into a drawer, and it never bothered him again. The story's not documented, just passed around from shopkeeper to shopkeeper in old Kyoto alleys. The kind of tale you hear while sipping tea in a place that hasn't changed in 150 years. But it's not the only one. Temple caretakers report the sound of movement in locked storerooms, wind chimes swaying without a breeze, old Gita sandals tapping softly on wooden walkways long after all visitors have gone home. No footprints, just the faint scuff of devotion. There's an entire subculture now, modern Tsukumogami artists who craft objects specifically meant to age into spiritual life. handmade brushes, ceramic sake flasks, fountain pens carved from century-old wood. The idea that if the item lasts long enough and is used with care, it may one day open its eye, not to haunt, but to remember you, to say you gave me life. I give you continuity. It's not horror, it's intimacy. But the darker side still exists. Discarded dolls with missing eyes, shattered fans left at the roadside, cameras tossed into bins full of undeveloped film. One legend tells of a typewriter donated to a thrift shop that typed a letter on its own one night. You taught me stories. Now I have one. The keys were sticky with ink. The shop burned down a week later. Coincidence? Maybe. But Japan doesn't like to risk that, especially in August. During Obon, when the spirits of the dead are said to return, people also bring out their things. Not just altars, but toys, books, teacups. They clean them, sit with them. Not because the objects contain spirits, but because they were present when spirits were alive. And in some way that presence rubbed off. You stand now in a flea market near Nara. The sun is hot. The smell of yakitori floats through the stalls. And on one table is a small porcelain cat worn chipped eyes faded. You pick it up. It's heavier than it should be. Not physically, emotionally. You feel something. Something small and silent and completely still waiting. Not in pain, just in pause. You don't buy it. You bow slightly and walk away. Because some things aren't meant to be owned, just acknowledged. So the next time you toss something, pause for a second. Acknowledge it. Thank it. Because who knows? Maybe 100 years from now, that umbrella you always forgot in the hallway might remember you too. The building is older than it looks. White walls, clean lines, glass that reflects the Kyoto skyline with unnerving clarity, a curved roof that suggests serenity. You could mistake it for a modern university facility or maybe an art gallery, but you're standing in front of one of the most quietly controversial institutions in Japan, the Kyoto University Department of Parapsychology. Officially, it's listed under another name, something appropriately academic, like anomalistic psychology or human consciousness research. But for decades, behind those neutral doors, scientists, monks, and mathematicians have gathered to study the unexplainable, not dismiss it, not debunk it, to understand it. And that makes this place different. Parapsychology isn't taboo in Japan the way it might be elsewhere. There's a long tradition of combining empirical observation with spiritual inquiry. After all, this is a country where physicists burn incense before experiments and where temples have earthquake sensors built into their architecture. Science and the unseen coexist here. And this building, it's one of their quiet frontiers. The research is varied. Some of it echoes what you'd expect: studies on telepathy, dreams, near-death experiences. But then there are the classified projects, the whispered ones, studies you won't find on any syllabus, like the mirror experiment, reportedly conducted in the late 1970s. The mirror experiment was simple in design. A subject was asked to sit alone in a room for 60 minutes, facing a mirror lit only by a single candle. Their reflections were recorded. So were their brain waves. The goal? To track dissociation patterns. The result? Several subjects described seeing their reflections move independently, blinking at the wrong time, smiling when they didn't. One man, an engineer with no history of hallucinations, insisted his reflection whispered to him, in a language he'd never heard before. The footage, gone. The logs, redacted. All that remains is a student's journal smuggled out, and later posted anonymously online. It ends with a single line. It's not the mirror that changes, it's what looks through you. Another infamous case was the Number House, a traditional Kyoto matcha house rented by graduate students in the 1990s. Nothing unusual until visitors began reporting number patterns, receipts with palindromes, clocks stopping at 3:33 a.m., GPS pings forming pentagonal shapes. One student claimed he woke up with a string of prime numbers scribbled on his arm in pencil. He lived alone. Investigators later discovered that the house sat on the convergence of 5 old property lines, one of which traced back to an Edo period Shugendo retreat. Monks there were said to use number chants to manipulate reality. The house was quietly vacated. And then there's the Dream Archive. Hidden in the basement of this very building, according to rumor, is a vault. Inside are hundreds of written dream reports, some going back as far as 1946, all submitted voluntarily. Some from patients, some from monks, some from anonymous drop-ins. Why? Because they match people dreaming the same images, the same doors, the same city with red moons and rivers that flow backward. A city that does not exist on any map. They've nicknamed it Yume no Machi, the Dream City. What's strange is how the entries evolve. Earlier reports describe arriving at the city. Later ones describe living there. Entire families. Streets with names. A newspaper that changes headlines from dream to dream. In one report, a man claims to have grown old in the dream, died there, and awoken with his hair a shade lighter. Coincidence? Maybe, but several researchers in the department now keep dream journals of their own. They say it's not about belief, it's about pattern recognition. And that brings us to the latest mystery, a project simply labeled Kainen. No one outside the department knows what the acronym stands for. Theories abound. Kyoto, neural entrainment nexus, knowledge non-existent narrative. But most believe it refers to a long-term experiment involving collective intention. In other words, thought applied at scale. There's a legend never confirmed that during the 2011 tsunami, a group of monks and scientists gathered here for an unscheduled ritual. They didn't pray for the wave to stop. They didn't chant for safety. They focused on one spot, a village, and that village remained untouched. Every town around it was leveled, but it stood unscathed. The government cited topography, but the Kainen project has continued ever since. Some think it's attempting to map how consciousness interacts with geography. That certain places, shrines, forests, abandoned temples don't just carry energy. They generate it. And if you could understand the code, you could influence reality, not with machines, but with mind. The department, of course, denies all this. They say they study cultural psychology, folklore, and cognition. But ask any student who's taken their seminars, and they'll tell you the curriculum changes depending on who asks. One student said she was told to write a paper on dream time overlap, and then mid-semester her professor asked her to stop. No explanation. Just, you've gone far enough. She transferred the next week. There's a bulletin board in the hallway here. Most visitors pass by without looking, but pinned near the bottom is a quote printed on yellowing paper. If you stare at the data long enough, it begins to stare back. This is not a metaphor. Be careful. No one claims authorship. No one removes it. Because here, even among the skeptics and scholars and lifelong empiricists, there's respect, not for ghosts, but for the unknown. You sit on a bench outside the building. The sun is beginning to set. The trees rustle just slightly. A door opens somewhere behind you, then closes. You check your phone. The time is wrong. 3 minutes fast. And somehow, You know that's correct. A breeze passes. You smell incense. But there's no temple nearby. You look up at the glass of the building at your reflection. And for a moment you think, there's a version of you inside that building, still sitting in class, still asking the questions, still waiting for the answer. You're walking beside a river that has no bridge, not a modern one at least. Just scattered stones poking through the surface slick with moss and time. On either side, the forest curls in like an afterthought. There are no signs, no railings, no lights, and yet this river is famous. You're in Kagoshima Prefecture, deep in the shadow of volcanoes and forgotten paths, and what you're walking toward isn't marked on tourist maps. Not clearly, not loudly, but locals know it by name. Inukai Notaki, the Inukai waterfall. It's beautiful. Tall and narrow, veiling down the rock face like it's been trying to hide for centuries. The sound is constant, a kind of hush disguised as thunder. The spray cools your skin before you see it, but the real mystery is what stands nearby. Tucked into the trees across from the falls is a stone gate unlike any other. Not tall, not painted, just dark stone, worn, weather-stained, and leaning slightly left. Moss crawls up the base. Ivy strangles the side, and across the top, carved in old kanji, is a phrase, "Beyond here lies what was never meant to remain." You pause, because there's no path beyond it, just forest, and a sense that something is wrong with the angle of the ground, like gravity itself isn't quite sure which way to pull. Local stories about this place are thin, hushed, no dramatic curses or famous hauntings, just a feeling passed down in soft phrases. Don't stay too long. Don't look past the gate. Don't try to find what's not there anymore. But someone did. In 1987, a university archaeology team visited the region to investigate a rumored burial site near Inukai. They weren't looking for ghosts. They were looking for old stoneware, perhaps remains of a forgotten Yamato-era settlement. They never published their findings. The team lead, Professor Matsuda, retired quietly the following year. His assistant moved to Hokkaido and refused further interviews. The local shrine that had supported the expedition burned down in 1990 under unknown circumstances. What did they find? The only clue comes from a single, badly damaged field note photographed, then lost. It reads, "Tunnel beneath the falls, old bricked. Walls are too smooth. Inside air electric. Found sigils that predate Yamato by centuries. Language unknown. Left immediately. Everyone agrees we won't return." No one has found that tunnel since, or admitted to trying, but hikers still feel strange here. Some say the air thickens near the base of the falls. Others report headaches. One man, a landscape photographer, collapsed after 5 minutes and was later diagnosed with transient global amnesia. He lost all memory of that afternoon, and when asked what he'd seen, he said only, "A door in the wrong place." Others speak of echoes, but not of the waterfall, of voices chanting, not in Japanese and not in time. One theory claims the gate near Inukai is a kekai gate, a boundary marker not meant for humans but for something else, a territorial seal separating a fragment of the old world, maybe even another timeline from ours. That to cross it is not to travel in space, but in history. An old monk from a nearby village once said, "The forest beyond the gate does not obey sun and moon, that it's always dusk there, that birds don't enter it, that their calls die in the throat before reaching those trees." And if that's true, then the real question isn't, "What's back there?" It's, "Why was it closed?" There's a theory never published known only to local historians and a few bold folklorists that Inukai was once a reversal site, a kind of spiritual drain where miswritten reality could be expelled. Forgotten gods, broken timelines, relics of belief systems no longer compatible with the present, a trash heap of cosmology. If that's the case, then the waterfall isn't cleansing, it's sealing, keeping the drain wet, keeping the passage dormant. Because without water, it might reopen. And what would come through wouldn't belong here, wouldn't even understand now. The few maps that chart this region, especially those drawn before the Meiji Restoration, leave a curious blank where Inukai sits. Not labeled, not crossed out, just empty, as if cartographers knew better than to claim it. And here's where things get stranger. In 2019, a drone enthusiast posted footage of the waterfall taken from above. At 17 seconds in, the drone dips low. For 3 frames, you can see something behind the cascade, a carved alcove lit unnaturally as if by a flame from inside. The video was removed within 48 hours. His account deleted, but A still circulates online, and in it, clearly visible, is a symbol etched in the stone above the alcove, a circle with 4 teeth biting inward. It doesn't match any known Japanese iconography, but it does match symbols found on 3 unearthed stones, recovered from the Yonaguni Monument, half a country away and underwater. Coincidence? No one knows. But people don't swim here, and they don't climb the rocks, and the gate remains untouched. You reach it now. The moss glows faintly in the late afternoon sun. The stone feels warm somehow, even as the mist of the falls cools your skin. You consider stepping through. You don't, not because of fear, because of instinct. Like something in your bones remembers this shape, remembers being told long ago in a time before memory that this is a place you do not cross. So you bow once and turn away. Behind you, the water roars on, and if there's a voice in it, it's not for you. Not yet. You're sitting in a narrow alley in the middle of Tokyo. It's late, closer to dawn than midnight. The neon has started to flicker out. The bars are closed. The vending machines are humming softly, the only light left falling in cold blue patches across the asphalt. And ahead of you, where the alley bends, there's a staircase, stone, narrow, leading down. You've passed this place a dozen times, maybe more, but you've never seen that staircase before. You step closer and realize you can't see the bottom, not because it's far, but because the shadows don't behave the way they should. They lean the wrong direction. You shine your phone flashlight down. It flickers, then dies. You consider going down anyway, because if the stories are true, you've just found one of Japan's most elusive legends. A Yurei no Kaiden, the Staircase of Ghosts. No one knows how many of them there are, or where exactly they appear. But the belief runs deep somewhere in the folds of the city, or deep in the mountains, or under shrines that forgot their gods. There exist staircases that weren't built by human hands. Not entirely, and when you descend them, something comes up. These aren't haunted houses or cursed objects. They're pathways, thin spots, self-contained mazes that exist in the folds of architecture where the maps don't quite line up. Most people pass them without noticing. They only appear at specific times, under specific conditions. It might be grief, it might be guilt, it might be nothing at all. But when you see one, you have to choose. Go down or turn away. One popular story tells of a journalist who found a staircase just outside Osaka Station. Concrete steps too new for the surrounding buildings. He counted them as he descended. 12. When he reached the bottom, he found himself in another station, dimly lit, tiled in beige with no signage. A few vending machines blinked in the distance. He turned to go back up. 14 steps. The number had changed, and when he emerged, it was night again. Even though only 10 minutes had passed, he filed a report, then left the country, and never wrote again. Another tale comes from a cleaning woman at a downtown Kyoto business hotel. She found a guest room door open. No one inside, but at the back of the room, where there had once been a closet, there was a stairwell leading downward into darkness. She stepped onto the top stair and immediately turned to stone, not literally, but inside. She spent 3 days in a hospital bed, conscious but unable to move. Her heart rate never changed. Her brain activity was normal, but her body simply stopped responding. She recovered on the 4th day. Her first words, "Don't open the door if there's no door frame." What does that mean? No one knows, but the pattern repeats. The staircases vary in size. Some spiral, some are straight. A few reportedly ascend instead of descend. But always the effect is the same. Something changes you, even if you don't notice it right away. Visitors report subtle disorientation afterward, misremembered birthdays, phones filled with photos they never took, a single red thread knotted around their keys. One man who descended such a staircase said he passed a mirror on the wall halfway down. His reflection didn't move, just stared at him and smiled. He smashed the mirror, but still dreams about it. Some spiritualists believe the Yurei no Kaidan aren't just paths, they're tests. That descending one is an act of spiritual reckoning, where you meet the part of yourself that never left a certain trauma, that waited behind. And if you fail, you trade places. Others go further. They claim these staircases lead to threshold realms, pockets of time-space not governed by normal rules. Places where souls that weren't properly grieved end up, where memories grow physical and grief takes form. In these spaces, you might meet your mother, but she won't recognize you. You might hear your own voice, but speaking a truth you haven't admitted yet. The staircases don't punish, they show. And sometimes that's enough. A Tokyo taxi driver once told his only passenger of the night, an older woman with a silent smile, that he used to see staircases like these in his dreams. She responded, "Not dreams, just practice." She disappeared when they reached her destination. The car was still locked from the inside. Urban legend maybe, but even city officials, construction workers, and janitors have quietly admitted seeing stairwells that shouldn't be there. Half built, then gone. One subway maintenance worker in 2004 reported a stairwell in an unused tunnel that led to a room filled with shoji screens, paper panels glowing from within. He walked around the room once. When he exited, he found his coworker in tears. "You were gone for an hour," they said, "but I saw you the whole time, just standing still. You sit now on the top step of the one in front of you. The street behind is unchanged, but the air has gone still, too still. You glance down. The staircase bends slightly to the left, then vanishes into the dark. Something about it tugs at your breath, like a memory you can't quite grasp, or a name you almost forgot. You lean forward, listen, and from far below, not in the air, but inside your chest, you hear a soft tapping, like someone descending, one step at a time. Then it stops. You don't run. You don't move. Because the truth is, you've always known this staircase. It's appeared in your dreams, in the pauses between thoughts, in the moment right before waking, when you feel like you're falling, but not down, back. And now you're here, one foot on the top step, one hand on the railing, and for a second, just one, you think you understand. The staircase wasn't meant to take you somewhere else. It was meant to bring you back to the version of yourself that kept going, kept descending, kept waiting for you to return. You exhale, stand, and walk away. You don't need the last step. Not tonight. But the stairs, they'll wait. They always do. They say there's a book that no one can finish. Not because it's long. It isn't. It's a slim volume, less than 150 pages, bound in faded black cloth, with no title on the spine, no table of contents, no publication date. The pages feel older than they are soft, but too heavy, slightly warm to the touch. It's called the Kojiki That Never Was, which is already confusing, because the Kojiki Japan's record of ancient matters is real. Compiled in the early 8th century, it's the earliest chronicle of the country's mythology, how the gods shaped the land, how emperors descended from Amaterasu, how chaos was tamed into a nation. But this book isn't the Kojiki. It's an alternate, a version that shouldn't exist. The story begins in 1968, when a university professor in Saitama reportedly acquired the text from a rural bookseller who claimed it came from an estate sale near Izumo. The professor, a linguist named Kawamura, described it as a shadow Kojiki structured, like the original, but filled with unfamiliar myths, distorted place names, and gods never recorded elsewhere. Gods that didn't behave. There was a moon deity that devoured its own reflection, a storm god that spoke only in questions, an unnamed figure who tore open the land to reveal a second sun beneath which nothing could lie. It read like mythology, but off, tilted, like looking at a familiar face through a sheet of warped glass. And the more he read, the worse it got. Kawamura reported that he began losing time. Hours gone in a blink. Nights where he dreamed in an unknown script. Days where he'd find notes written in his own hand, but not in his language. He made one phone call to a colleague muttering, "It's not that the book is unfinished. It's that it doesn't want to be completed." He was found in his study weeks later alive, but silent. His shelves had been emptied. The book was gone, but a photocopy, blurry partial, surfaced years later in a private collection. And now the legends begin. People who read even one page experience strange things. Not nightmares exactly, but reversals. Left-handed people becoming right-handed. Digital clocks reading time in kanji. One woman opened the book and saw her grandmother's handwriting on page 12. Her grandmother had died before she was born. The copy had never left Tokyo, but the writing matched perfectly. Another reader reported a passage that changed every time he read it. Same line, different verbs, different outcomes. One version spoke of a flood that would return. Another said it had never ended. Some believe the book isn't a hoax or forgery, but a mirror. That it reflects the myths we refuse to accept. The stories edited out of the official record. The versions of Japan that almost were. Versions where the wrong gods won, where mountains spoke, where time turned inward and became a circle, not a line. Scholars avoid the topic. Too fringe, too weird. But tucked into the back archives of obscure journals and footnotes are hints, references to non-standard Kojiki fragments and apocryphal cosmologies. Quiet acknowledgments that not everything was preserved, that some texts went missing or were made to disappear. There's even a name for this phenomenon, urakami, not a place, but a term meaning the hidden paper or the shadow script. It refers to a body of lost Japanese religious texts that existed alongside official doctrine but contradicted it. Dangerous texts, wild texts, stories that gave power to the wrong spirits and structure to chaos. Some say the Kojiki that never was is the last of these, and it still works, not as a narrative, but as a trigger, because something in the rhythm of the language, its cadences, its symbolic inversions, acts like a key, unlocking parts of the reader that were closed, or forgotten, or never supposed to be opened at all. One man said the book knew him, not metaphorically. He claimed it described his childhood, including moments he had forgotten, places he had never been until he realized they were dreams he'd had as a child, recorded perfectly in the margins. How? No one knows. Some believe the book is a construct, an entity that forms itself based on the reader's reality, not static, not fixed, a story that becomes whatever it needs to be to show you something you're not ready to see. And if that's true, then the final page isn't written yet. It waits for you. That's why no one can finish it. Because finishing it would mean accepting the world it creates. The version of Japan where rivers speak, where mirrors weep, where gods lie sleeping not above us, but inside us, humming like old machines left running for centuries. So if you ever see a thin black book in a secondhand shop, no title, no price tag, no ISBN, think twice before opening it, because it might open you instead. And what comes out? Well, that's your story now. The night feels softer now. Your breathing has slowed. The hum of the world outside cars, screens, worries has faded to a hush. You've walked with gods and ghosts, peeked behind the veil of shrines, and shadowed tunnels, dipped your toes into timelines that might never have existed, yet somehow feel deeply familiar. You've stood beneath blood-stained ceilings, touched stones warm with memory, climbed into the clouds to meet cedar trees that remember your name. You've heard footsteps that don't echo and voices that wait inside waterfalls. You've passed through torii gates not meant for the living. You've walked past staircases, wondering if they led inward instead of down. And still, some part of you wonders, was it all true? But truth isn't the point, is it? Because the stories you carry now aren't just myths. They're mirrors. Reflections of longing, fear, reverence, and grief passed through centuries of silence. Whether they come from gods, or people, or places that dream in the dark, they matter because you felt them. And maybe, just maybe, they felt you back. So tonight, as your eyelids drift lower, know this: you are not alone. You are accompanied by ancient laughter, by prayers whispered into lacquered wood, by legends left out of history books, but never forgotten by the land. You walk with echoes. You sleep beneath stories. And if a dream finds you tonight of a forest that breathes, or a city not on any map, or a voice speaking softly in a language you've never learned, but somehow understand, don't be afraid. You've been there before, and it remembers. Now take one last breath. Let it out slow. Let the world dissolve into mist and memory.